Chapter 1204. Jiang Taishan's actions were indeed too much. Just because the sacred palace was weak and didn't have a perfect quasi-saint expert, Jiang Taishan was bullying them like this. Normally speaking, even if the sacred palace was weak and didn't have a perfect quasi-saint expert, the sacred palace didn't have the qualifications to claim secret areas. But no matter what, the sacred palace should have a share of the 18 cultivation secret areas. But now, Jiang Taishan wasn't even willing to give the sacred palace a share of the 18 secret areas, and not even a single one. Because of the anger in his heart, Ronding's tone became very stiff even in front of Jiang Taishan. A cold glint flashed across Jiang Taishan's eyes when he heard Ronding's words. However, at his level, he was able to conceal his emotions. Jiang Taishan didn't lose his temper, but instead, a supreme sovereign of the supreme sovereign spoke up in a similarly cold tone. Randang, watch your tone. Your sacred palace didn't contribute much this time. What? Do you think it's too little for the supreme sovereign to distribute it like this? Someone naturally stood up for Jiang Taishan before he even spoke up. Hearing this person's words, the masters present all had different expressions. The people of the Thousand Beasts Valley didn't care about the matter, while the people of the Nine Heavens all sat upright, as if they didn't care about the outside world. The supreme sovereigns of the Thousand Beasts Valley and Nine Heavens didn't speak, and the Liwang sect and supreme sovereign were clearly working together to oppress the sacred palace and reduce the sacred palace's benefits to the minimum. The secret areas and cultivation secret areas couldn't be given to the sacred palace, but the spirit veins, pills, and talismans of little value could be given to the sacred palace. They were completely treating the sacred palace as fools. It was an extremely unreasonable distribution, but from these people's words, it was as if the sacred palace had taken a huge advantage. Another supreme sovereign from the Power King's sect chimed in after the supreme sovereign's words. Brother Xiao Sheng, there are some things that those who are content with what they have are happy with. Rewards should naturally be distributed according to the size of the contribution. Since the sacred palace contributed the least, the benefits should naturally be the least. Everyone spoke up one after another with the same attitude. Jiang Taishan's distribution was very good and fair, and the sacred palace didn't lose out. As if the sacred palace was already in the bag, the supreme sovereign of the supreme sovereign and Liwang sect were all full of confidence as they looked at Xiao Sheng's group of four. In their opinion, this should be the end of today's matter. After dealing with the sacred palace, the supreme deity sect, Power King sect, and Nine Heavens would split the remaining secret realms and cultivation secret realms. The supreme sovereign of the supreme sovereign of the three sects was, and the supreme sovereign of course have a says of the sacred palace. The supreme sovereign say, what do you think of Xiao Sheng? Estes, of a Li Wang, of STT Havs the house? Think, Teat Havs. TTS, If it's reasonable, then it's settled. Our three sects will discuss the next division later. Jiang Taishan's words were clearly a reminder to Tianju. His meaning was obvious. As long as Tianju nodded, Jiang Taishan would directly send the sacred palace away, and the remaining things would be divided among the three sections. In Jiang Taishan's opinion, Tianju definitely wouldn't refuse, and the supreme sovereigns below also thought the same. However, to everyone's surprise, Tianju indifferently spoke up after Jiang Taishan's voice faded. I don't think it's very fair. The sacred palace has contributed a lot, and this kind of distribution isn't appropriate. The sacred palace should have some secret areas and secret cultivation areas, but the sacred palace didn't get anything, and those pills and talismans can be said to be useless. Therefore, I think we should reconsider. This simple sentence stunned the quasi-saint supreme sovereign of the supreme sovereign and Liwang sect. Even Jiang Taishan was taken aback for a moment before looking at Tianju with a puzzled expression. What did this mean? Tianju was actually opposing them. Didn't he know that the three sects would only be able to obtain more benefits after sending the sacred palace away? Everyone originally thought that they had the sacred palace in their grasp, and that this time, the sacred palace could only suffer in silence. But who would have thought that Tianju would actually say such a thing at this time? It was simply unexpected. Jiang Taishan was puzzled, but he soon guessed something and unconsciously glanced at Xiao Sheng and the others. Tianju's words at this time clearly indicated that he was on the Sacred Palace's side. In this case, there was only one explanation, and that was that 9 heavens and the Sacred Palace had reached some kind of agreement. 9 heavens would stand on the Sacred Palace's side in the division of benefits. Thinking of this, Jiang Taishan suddenly had a bad premonition and turned to look at Lion's sect. Since the Sacred Palace and 9 heavens had reached some kind of agreement, then wouldn't the Myriad Beast Valley be even simpler? After all, the Myriad Beast Valley wasn't participating in the division of benefits this time, so it wouldn't be difficult for the Sacred Palace to win over the Myriad Beast Valley. Having already expected this, Lion's sect also laughed heartily in response to Jiang Taishan's gaze. This matter originally had nothing to do with my Myriad Beast Valley, but since I'm here, I naturally have something to say. We're all allies and have fought side by side before, so we can't go too far. The division must be fair. Don't you agree, Brother Jiang? Jiang Taishan's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard Lion's sect's words. As I thought, the development of the situation was somewhat unexpected. He originally thought that the Sacred Palace had no power to resist and could only accept it, but at this moment, it seemed that they were no longer in control. Tianju and Lion's sect spoke out one after another, all of them speaking up for the Sacred Palace. As such, Jiang Taishan naturally couldn't be stubborn. After all, Tianju and Lion's sect weren't afraid of Jiang Taishan. Falling into silence, Huanggu also fell into deep thought. He originally thought that it would be very easy to get rid of the Sacred Palace, but now it seemed that it would be a little difficult. Jiang Taishan was indeed a shrewd old man. After only a moment of silence, Jiang Taishan opened his mouth to speak. There was still a spring breeze-like smile on his face, as if he wasn't affected by Tianju and Lion's sect's words at all. Jiang Taishan looked toward Xiao Sheng and said with a smile, since everyone disagrees with the division just now, let's discuss it again. We're all allies, so it's very normal to have disagreements. Brother Xiao Sheng, how about this? Why don't the Sacred Palace decide what division you think is fair? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. If you want to chat about Sword Master of 8 Desolations with more like-minded people, follow excellent literature on WeChat. Chat about life, find a confidant. Chapter 1205. Jiang Taishan took the initiative to ask for Xiao Sheng's opinion. This was something that no one had ever thought of before. Of course, it was also because Tianju and the Lion sect had spoken. With these two around, Jiang Taishan naturally could not continue to be stubborn. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, Xiao Sheng only said one sentence. As long as it's fair. He did not specify how the distribution would be done, as long as it was fair. Xiao Sheng's words put Jiang Taishan in a difficult position. Jiang Taishan was also unable to deal with the current situation, but Tianju took the initiative to speak up. How about this? The Liwang sect and the Supreme God sect will each have 1, while the Sacred Palace will have 2. As for 9 heavens, we won't need it. After all, the alliance this time was initiated by the Sacred Palace. Moreover, the Sacred Palace is newly established and is in great need of secret zones, so we'll let them have 2 secret zones. As for cultivation secret zones, the 3 of us will each have 5, while the Sacred Palace will have 3. As for the other spirit veins, properties, pills, talismans, and so on, we'll divide them equally. What does Brother Jiang think? Tianju took the initiative to speak. Jiang Taishan was clearly taken aback. This wasn't because Tianju's allocation wasn't fair enough. On the contrary, it was very fair. However, Jiang Taishan hadn't expected that Tianju would give up a secret domain of his own accord and give it to the Sacred Palace. The fairest distribution of the 4 secret zones was naturally one for each of the 4 great sections. But now, the Supreme God sect and the Liwang sect each had a secret zone of their own, but 9 heavens had given it up and given it to the Sacred Palace. Jiang Taishan had not expected this at all. Of course, he clearly did not know the conditions of the Sacred Palace and 9 heavens. According to the agreement between the two sides, 9 heavens could send people to cultivate in these 2 secret zones for the next 100 years. Therefore, it was not a loss for 9 heavens. However, Tianju naturally could not tell Jiang Taishan about this. Tianju looked at Jiang Taishan with a slight smile and waited for his reply. It was only after a long while that Jiang Taishan revealed a somewhat unnatural smile. Brother Tianju, you're really surprising. Is 9 heavens really willing to give up on a secret realm? Since we are allies, we naturally have to help each other. What do you think of my proposal, Brother Jiang? Tianju smiled indifferently. 9th heaven was determined to give him an inheritance. Hearing this, Jiang Taishan looked at the ancient, desolate, and lion sect and asked, "What do you two think?" Although the Myriad Beasts Valley wasn't participating in the distribution of benefits this time, Jiang Taishan obviously couldn't ignore the lion sect. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, lion sect was the first to speak with a smile. I feel that Brother Tianju's suggestion is not bad. After all, it's 9 heavens' business to give up on their own accord. There's no loss to the Supreme Deity sect and Li Wang's sect. Don't you think so, Brother Huanggu? The lion sect would definitely agree. And what he said was also correct. 9 heavens was willing to give up an inheritance to the Saint Palace, but that was their business. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Deity sect or the Power King sect. There were a total of 4 inheritances. Putting aside the Myriad Beasts Valley, the fairest distribution method was naturally the Supreme Deity sect, Li Wang's sect, 9 heavens, and the Sacred Palace. Now that the Supreme Deity sect and Li Wang's sect had each been given an inheritance, there was nothing wrong with 9 heavens giving their quota to the Sacred Palace. A strange look flashed across the ancient desolate's eyes. There was no problem with Tianju's distribution plan. The 4 great sects would all receive the most fair distribution. At the same time, the ancient desolate could accept such a result. It would naturally be better if they could obtain more benefits, but looking at the current situation, it might be a little difficult. 9 heavens and the Myriad Beasts Valley had made it clear that they were determined to advance and retreat together with the Sacred Palace. If things became too stiff, it would not end well. Thinking of this, the ancient desolate did not act rashly and smiled faintly. Since the lion sect agrees, I also agree with Brother Tianju. Both the lion sect and the ancient desolate had agreed to Tianju's proposal. Jiang Taishan actually had no other choice, but he still asked Xiao Sheng. Brother Xiao Sheng, what does the Sacred Palace think? We naturally have no objections. Xiao Sheng indifferently replied. The Sacred Palace naturally had no objections to such a distribution. Although the 2 heritage inheritances had to give 3 places to 9 heavens every year, and the Sacred Palace was only given 3 cultivation secret realms, while the Supreme Deity sect and the other 2 sects were given 5 each, this was already the best result. At least, it was much better than Xiao Sheng and the others had expected. Xiao Sheng also nodded in agreement. Although Jiang Taishan was a little unhappy, he did not show it on his face and smiled at the various great sovereigns present. In that case, we will distribute according to Brother Tianju's proposal. In the following time, the various sects should prepare to receive their share of the benefits. The situation was completely out of Jiang Taishan's expectations. He no longer had much interest in the matter, and after a few casual words, the crowd dispersed. The distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall had been decided, and the result was naturally eye-popping. Without knowing the inside story, the Sacred Palace was undoubtedly the biggest winner this time. Although the Sacred Palace had 2 fewer cultivation secret realms than the other 3 great sects, they had 1 more heritage secret realm. The value of a heritage secret realm was obviously not something that 2 cultivation secret realms could compare to. Therefore, the Sacred Palace was undoubtedly the biggest winner this time. The disciples of the 4 great sects were all extremely puzzled because they had not expected such a result. On the other hand, Xiao Chun, who was in his residence, was very calm when he heard the news. He was not surprised at all by the result. Seeing Xiao Chun so calm, the Azure Emperor, Bai Yi and the other sacred palace chosen, who had rushed over after hearing the news, looked at Xiao Chen strangely. Senior brother Xiao Chen, aren't you excited at all? Our sacred palace is the biggest winner this time. Xiao Chen's performance was simply too calm, which puzzled everyone. Hearing this, Xiao Chen smiled faintly and said, "That's right. I already expected this result. Everything had been planned by Xiao Chen. With the help of the Thousand Beasts Valley and Nine Heavens, this result was naturally not surprising. However, the only flaw was that in order to persuade Nine Heavens, the Sacred Palace had also made a promise. Although the two heritage secret realms seemed to belong to the Sacred Palace, half of them still belonged to Nine Heavens. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1206. The two secret zones seemed to belong solely to the Sacred Palace, but Nine Heavens still wanted a share of the profits. It was because of this that Nine Heavens had chosen to give one of its secret zones to the Sacred Palace. Of course, no matter what, this was already the best outcome for the Sacred Palace. With these two secret zones, the Sacred Palace's foundation could grow rapidly, which was what the Sacred Palace needed the most right now. As for some small losses, there was nothing they could do about it. After all, the Sacred Palace was weak. It was good that others could help you with many things, but in the end, it all depended on you. For example, if the Sacred Palace had a supreme sovereign at the perfect stage of the quasi-saint stage, there would be no need for them to ally with Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beast Valley. The Sacred Palace alone would be enough to deal with these matters. They were still weaker, so some losses were necessary. After all, Nine Heavens wouldn't help them for no reason. There was no need to fuss over these matters. The day after the meeting, Xiao Chun and the other Sacred Palace chosen returned to the Sacred Palace. As for Xiao Sheng and the other patriarchs, as well as the Sacred Palace Saint Sovereigns, they were going to the Night Ghost Pavilion and Nine Heavens to receive the benefits. These benefits could allow the Sacred Palace to rise to a higher level in a short period of time. If it weren't for these benefits, the five great sects wouldn't have joined forces to destroy the Night Ghost Pavilion and Demonic Sky Palace. After a round of selection, the Sacred Palace finally chose two secret domains. They were the Night Ghost Pavilion's Ghost Realm and the Demonic Sky Palace's Black Demon Mountain. These two heritage places were the most effective for the human race, so Xiao Chun naturally chose these two secret realms. The Ghost Realm was relatively all-round. It was helpful for the cultivation of the physical body, cultivation, and martial skills. It could be said to be a secret domain without any obvious flaws. As for the Black Demon Mountain, its greatest use was to help people improve their cultivation. This was something the Sacred Palace urgently needed. The two secret domains and 3 cultivation secret domains will be personally moved to the Sacred Palace by Xiao Sheng and the others. From now on, they would be the Sacred Palace's cultivation secret domains for the many disciples to cultivate in. Since they didn't need to care about these matters, Xiao Chun and the others naturally returned to the Sacred Palace first. Everyone was in a good mood when they returned to the Sacred Palace. After this battle, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been destroyed, and the power structure of the North Star boundary had changed drastically. The Sacred Palace could be considered as a true powerhouse in the North Star boundary. At the same time, the benefits they had gained from this battle filled everyone with hope for the Sacred Palace's future. The spaceship slowly entered the Holy Region and stopped at the main square. Xiao Chun and the rest disembarked and parted ways. Xiao Chun brought Tian Yu, Qin Shu, and the other 2 girls back to his cave abode. After resting for more than 2 hours and washing up, Xiao Chun brought the 4 girls to the courtyard where Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing lived. The 2 elders naturally heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that everyone was safe. The 2 elders were naturally worried about everyone's safety during the fierce battle with the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. However, everything was fine now. Xiao Chun had returned safely, and the 4 girls were not in any danger. That night, Xiao Chun accompanied the 2 elders for a meal. Of course, Chun Ling and Long Qing also came. However, Xiao Chan felt that Chun-Ling was a little strange today. When they were drinking, he was always absent-minded. There were a few times when he was distracted and didn't even respond when Xiao Chen called him. Sensing Chun-Ling's strangeness, the group bid farewell to the two elders after they were full. Just as Chun-Ling and Long Qing were about to leave, Xiao Chun suddenly called out to them. "Big brother, second sister, wait a moment. What's wrong, little brother?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing asked in a normal manner. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't say much. He smiled and said, "We haven't talked alone for a long time. Do you want to come to my place?" He took the initiative to invite the two to his residence. Long Qing didn't refuse, and Chun-Ling nodded silently. The group quickly arrived at Xiao Chen's residence. Tian Yu and the other girls were very sensible and didn't bother with their own matters. Fei Mei and Enlon also respectfully left after making tea for the three of them. Soon, only Xiao Chun and his siblings were left in the front hall. Without any outsiders, Xiao Chun directly asked Chun-Ling, "Big brother, what's wrong with you today? Is there something on your mind?" Chun-Ling was obviously in the wrong today, which was why Xiao Chun invited the two of them here. He wanted to clarify if Chun-Ling had encountered any trouble. If there was trouble, Xiao Chen naturally wouldn't stand by and do nothing. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chun-Ling revealed an expression that said, "As expected, you still came to ask." Then he sighed and said, "Third brother, aren't you very curious about my hometown?" "I'm very curious. What's wrong?" Hearing this, Xiao Chun asked curiously, "Then let me tell you today. My hometown isn't in the North Star Realm. It's in the Central World." Previously, Xiao Chun had asked Chun-Ling about his hometown more than once, but unfortunately, Chun-Ling had evaded every time. But today, Chun-Ling actually took the initiative to talk about this matter. Xiao Chun was naturally puzzled, but after hearing Chun-Ling's narration, Xiao Chun also calmed down and listened attentively. Chun-Ling's understanding of this world was clearly much clearer than Xiao Chen's. It could even be said that even Jiang Taishan, Tianju, the primordial, and the Lion sect, the #1 great sovereigns, didn't understand this world as well as Chun-Ling. The simplest thing was that they didn't know anything beyond the North Star Realm. According to Chun-Ling, this world had a total of 4 star realms, which are the North Star Realm, the South Star Realm, the East Star Realm, and the West Star Realm. In addition to these 4 star realms, there is also the Central World located in the center of these 4 star realms. The 4 star realms were about the same size, and they were separated into 4 sides of the Central World. At the end of each star realm was a layer of restriction known as the horizon limit. The horizon limit was set up by the heavenly Tao in order to stabilize the space of the 4 star realms. Therefore, experts above the Saint Realm were unable to travel between the 4 star realms through the horizon limit. It was also because of this that the 4 star realms could be said to be completely independent existences. As for the Central World, it was an incomparably huge continent without the so-called endless starry sky. However, such a continent's area exceeded the area of the 4 star realms combined. One continent was larger than the 4 star realms combined. One could imagine how vast such a continent was. And Chun-Ling's hometown, or rather, his home, was in the Central World. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 12:07. Listening to Chun-Ling's story, this was the first time Xiao Chun had heard about matters outside of the North Star boundary. He remembered that when he first came into contact with the North Star boundary, Xiao Chun had thought that he was a frog at the bottom of a well. This was because compared to the entire North Star boundary, whether it was the heavenly Chan continent or the Tiana continent, they were like a drop in the ocean. In his mind, the North Star boundary could be said to be extremely vast. But now, Chun-Ling was telling him that outside of the North Star boundary, there were 3 other star boundaries, as well as the Central World, which was even more vast than the 4 star boundaries. Chun-Ling's words undoubtedly shocked Xiao Chun to the extreme. At the same time, it overturned all of Xiao Chen's previous knowledge. After briefly introducing the North Star boundary, the South Star boundary, the East Star boundary, the West Star boundary, and the Central World, Chun-Ling did not continue. This was because he needed to give Xiao Chun some time to digest. He took a sip of tea and looked at the stunned Xiao Chun and Long Qing. Chun Ling smiled faintly and did not rush the two of them. For the two of them who did not understand the outside world at all, hearing these things for the first time was indeed a huge shock. Now, the two of them needed time to digest these things. After waiting quietly for a while, Xiao Chun finally took a deep breath and said, "The four-star boundaries and the central world. Is this the true appearance of the world we live in? Whether it was the former heavenly Chan continent, the Tiana continent, or the current North Star boundary, compared to the real world, they were all just a part of it." As he understood this world, Xiao Chun became more and more amazed at the profoundness and vastness of this world. However, at the same time as he was shocked, Xiao Chun also became more determined to become stronger. This was because only by becoming stronger could he truly understand this world and travel to every place in this world. Think about it. An ordinary person without cultivation would not be able to leave the heavenly Chan continent in his lifetime, let alone the North Star boundary. A cultivator with ordinary talent would only be able to travel in the North Star boundary in his lifetime. Only the true dragons and phoenixes would have the opportunity to step on the stage of this world and meet and compete with various geniuses. After taking a deep breath and whispering softly, Xiao Chun looked at Chun Ling and said with a smile, "Big brother, there must be a lot of experts in the central world, right?" "Yes, a lot." Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Chun Ling nodded and replied, "There are more great emperors of the great saint realm, not to mention the half-step great saints, quasi-saints, and saints. In the vast central world, there were as many experts as there were clouds. Geniuses were even more numerous. There were more saints and saintesses and saints and saintesses. There were more than 100 saints and saintesses. There were more than 100 of them, saints and saintesses. Although the central world was so big, there were only 100 saints and saintesses. The number seemed small, but the saints and saintesses of the central world could not be compared to the saints and saintesses of the four major astral realms. The biggest difference between the two was that the saints and saintesses of the four major astral realms were selected by their respective sex. However, in the central world, the sex, even the great saint sex, were not qualified to confer the title of saint or saintess. In the central world, there was only one way to become a saint or saintess, and that was to challenge the saint ranking. Only those who left their names on the saint ranking were qualified to become a saint or saintess of the central world. Otherwise, no one would recognize you as a saint or saintess. There were more than 50 saints and sovereigns. After hearing Chun Ling's words, Xiao Chun could not help but gasp. This was simply too sensational. There had not been a great saint in the North Star realm for tens of thousands of years. However, there were more than 50 such existences in the central world. Xiao Chun was shocked once again, but this time, he quickly came back to his senses. His eyes flashed with a strong sense of excitement. "Big brother, one day, we will go back to the central world, right?" He had a strong yearning for the central world. If he could really go to the center of the world one day, where there were as many experts as there were clouds and saints as there were rain, how delightful would that be? To put it bluntly, the fights in the North Star realm were just small skirmishes. However, the central world was the center of this world, and the experts there were the real leaders of this era. Xiao Chun had always yearned to be able to fight with these real geniuses. Chun Ling smiled when he saw that Xiao Chun had regained his composure so quickly and was not depressed at all. Instead, he had an eager expression on his face. "Don't worry, we'll be able to go there soon. Today, I want to talk to you about something else, not this." What Chun Ling really wanted to say was not this, but Xiao Chun and Long Qing did not have much understanding of the outside world. In order to better explain what was going to happen next, Chun Ling had no choice but to briefly introduce the four major star realms and the central world to the two of them. Finally, it was time to talk about the main topic. At this time, Chun Ling also straightened his face, and his tone was not as calm as before. On the contrary, it became a little dignified. Actually, what I want to tell you is an ancient prophecy passed down in the central divine realm, or rather, the rules of this world. Prophecy? Rules. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Long Qing were both puzzled. In the face of the two's puzzlement, Chunling did not keep them in suspense and explained. A long time ago, this world did not have the so-called central world and the four major star realms. At that time, the entire world was an incomparably huge continent, much bigger than the current central world. At that time, the 100 races lived on this continent. However, as the 100 races cultivated, the origin energy between heaven and earth was quickly consumed. That era could be said to be the most glorious era. Not to mention that great saints were everywhere, but the number of great saints among the 100 races was definitely more than 1,000, or even more. It was precisely because of this terrifying consumption that the rules of heaven and earth forcibly separated the original world in order to preserve the origin energy, which resulted in the formation of the central world and the four major star realms. Usually, the five sides did not have much contact, but this forced separation was also the rules of heaven and earth for self-preservation. However, at the same time, after the world was forcibly separated, every few 100,000 years, the four major star realms and the central world would once again merge into one, forming the original appearance of the world. Once again converging into a complete continent, the 100 races would coexist. At the same time, the rules of heaven would also deliberately arrange for the 100 races to attack each other. This was the widely spread 100 race war in the central world. Chapter 1208. After hearing Chunling's words during the 100 race war, Xiao Chun and Long Qing fell into deep thought. They had never thought that there would be such a thing. The heavenly Tao rules would split the world into 5 parts. Looking at the two deep in thought, Chunling did not say anything more. In fact, there was one thing that Chunling did not tell the two of them. Every time there was a 100 race war, the victorious race would receive unimaginable benefits. And such benefits were bestowed by the heavenly Tao rules. No one knew why the heavenly Tao rules were like this, but one thing was certain. Any race that received such benefits could at least become a powerful race. For example, the beast race, demon race, god race, ghost race, barbarian race, heaven race, and so on. These races had all won at least 100 race war. Even the human race was the same. However, according to what Chunling knew, the human race had only won once in the 100 race war. The reason why the human race was able to win that time was because an absolutely terrifying figure had appeared in the human race. He was called the Human Emperor by the world. It was because of his leadership that the human race had won that 100 race war. It was only that one time, but the human race had succeeded in rising. Although the human race was still weak in front of old and powerful races like the god race and demon race, at least they had a certain right to speak and some power to contend with them. These were the benefits of winning the 100 race war. The strongest people of the victorious races would also receive rewards from the heavenly Tao rules. However, without exception, these people who received special reward from the heavenly Tao rules all mysteriously disappeared in the end. There were rumors that they had broken through to the great saint realm and reached an unimaginable level. This world could not withstand their power, so they went to a higher plane. This was only a guess. As for the truth, no one knew. Chunling did not tell Xiao Chun and Long Qing about these things. The two of them were still too far away from these things. If they wanted to have the ability to influence the 100 race war, they needed to at least break through to the great saint realm. One must know that once the 100 races war broke out, even quasi-saints couldn't be considered top-notch experts. Only those true the great sage had the right to speak and the ability to influence the entire war situation. After pondering for a while, in the end, it was still Xiao Chun who recovered first. Looking at Chunling, Xiao Chun said softly, "Big brother, you mean that very soon our 5 worlds will merge together again? When the time comes, we will gather in the central world." "That's right. When the time comes, all the continents of the 4 major astral realms will be forcefully merged into the central world, forming an incomparably huge continent, forming the original appearance of this world. The war of the 100 clans will begin." Hearing this, Chunling nodded slightly. This was the arrangement of the heavenly Tao, and no one could resist it. In this world, even the great sage did not have the ability to challenge the heavenly Tao. He had learned something incredible from Chunling, and this matter concerned the four major astral realms as well as everyone in the central world. No matter if you had cultivation or not, there was no way to avoid it. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chan finally said, "It's best to tell the four patriarchs about this matter as soon as possible so that they can be prepared." Since Chunling knew about this, he should tell Xiao Sheng and the other four patriarchs so that the sacred palace could make preparations in advance. Chunling nodded in agreement to Xiao Chen's suggestion. Subsequently, the three of them chatted for a while more before going their separate ways. After sending off Chunling and Long Qing, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with excitement. The War of the 100 Races in the Central World had shocked Xiao Chun, but more than that, he was excited. To be able to stand on the same stage as the true geniuses of the various races who had lived in the Central World since childhood was a huge challenge for Xiao Chun, but at the same time, it was also a huge temptation. In the North Star world, Xiao Chun already stood at the top of the younger generation. Although Xiao Chun could not guarantee 100% victory against the other First Saints, there were not many people in the younger generation who could make Xiao Chun fear. Although Chunling did not say much earlier, Xiao Chun still heard some things. Compared to the saints and saintesses of the four major astral realms, the saints and saintesses of the central world were the truly terrifying existences. If the saints and saintesses of the four major astral realms went to the central world, they could only be fake saints and saintesses. In addition to yearning for the mysterious central world, Xiao Chun was also full of curiosity about the realm above the Great Saint realm. From Chunling's words, it was not difficult for Xiao Chun to guess that the Great Saint realm was definitely not the limit of martial arts. Although there had never been anyone above the Great Saint realm in this world, it did not mean that the Great Saint realm was the limit of martial arts. There were definitely higher realms above it. It seems that the saying that martial arts have no end is true. Soon, he came back to his senses. At the same time, after returning, Xiao Chun truthfully told Tianyue, Qin Shu, Fei Mei, Qin Yao, and the other girls about this matter. After hearing this news from Xiao Chun, the girls were extremely shocked. It took them almost 2 hours to come back to their senses. Xiao Chun was not too surprised by the girls' shock. This matter was too sensational, but fortunately, with Xiao Chun by their side, although the girls were shocked, they were not too timid and afraid. The reason was very simple. In the hearts of the girls, as long as Xiao Chun was there, it did not matter where they were. Because as long as they were with Xiao Chun, the girls' hearts were very stable and they felt very safe. After briefly telling the girls about this matter, the next day, Xiao Chun also brought Long Qing and Chunling to find Xiao Sheng and the other four old ancestors. He did not tell the four that Chunling was the reincarnation of a mighty person. This was also Chunling's idea. He casually found an excuse and only said that Chunling saw a record in a secret realm. He truthfully told Xiao Sheng and the other three about the central world and the four major astral realms. At first, the four of them were still a little skeptical. After all, this matter was too shocking. In the end, it was only after Xiao Chen's strong persuasion that Xiao Sheng and the other four were still half convinced. Old ancestor, this matter is very serious. So no matter what, it's better to believe it's true than not. Moreover, even if this record is fake, there's no loss for us to take some precautions in advance, right? Xiao Chen looked at Xiao Sheng and the other three and said, it was obvious that the four of them did not quite believe it. So Xiao Chen said this. After hearing this, the four of them were silent for a moment. Then, Xiao Sheng said with a serious expression, Chen'er is right. This matter is too serious, so it's better to believe it's true than not and make preparations in advance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1209. Xiao Xing chose to accept Xiao Chen's suggestion. In fact, this was very normal. First of all, Xiao Chun, Long Qing, and Chunling could be said to be the leaders of all the disciples in the sacred palace. Moreover, Xiaosheng was very clear about their personalities. It was impossible for them to speak carelessly about such an important matter. Given Xiao Chun and the other two's personalities, since they had spoken, it must be true. Moreover, as Xiao Chun said, even if this matter was false, there was no harm in making early preparations for the sacred palace. As Xiaosheng spoke, Randing, Bing Lian, and Meng Jin nodded in succession after a brief moment of silence. All right, making early preparations is better than taking precautions. In that case, let's do as Chun, and the others say. They accepted Xiao Chun and the other two's suggestion. The preparation work was actually not complicated. It was just a matter of time and effort. However, the current sacred palace could still support the consumption of financial and material resources. According to Chunling, once the four astral boundaries and the central world merged, the experts of the various races would begin to act. As a quasi-sage sect of the human race great saints in the central world would obviously rope in the sacred palace and provide protection and certain resources for the sacred palace. This was certain. After all, the 100 Races War was not based on sex or families, but on races. This was the meaning of the heavenly Tao. Therefore, every race was equivalent to a force. In order to let their own race win the 100 Races War, the warriors of the same race would definitely be very united. There was no doubt about this. After all, if they were divided, it would be detrimental to both sides. Everyone understood this simple logic. Moreover, during the 100 Races War, if there was still internal strife, it could only be said that they were digging their own graves. But on the other hand, the great sage of one's own race would provide protection, but the experts of the other races would definitely attack. Therefore, the moment of fusion was the most dangerous. If the great sage of another race found the sacred palace first, then the sacred palace would be in danger. However, this also depended on luck. After the fusion, where would the heavenly Chun continent appear? If it happened to appear in the territory of the human race, then there would be nothing to worry about. However, one could never place one's hopes on luck. Therefore, the necessary preparations had to be made. At the very least, the sacred palace needed to have the ability to stall for time until the great sage of the human race arrived. Combining all of the above reasons, Chunling's suggestion was to use the heavenly Chun continent as their priority. First, they had to set up a massive defensive formation to protect the heavenly Chun continent. This formation was huge, and it consumed a lot of resources. However, there was no other way. It had to be done. Next, a defensive formation was set up in every city and sect. This was the second layer of protection. Of course, the sacred palace didn't need to be engraved, but it needed to be strengthened. With these two layers of protection, they should be able to stall for some time. As for the rest, it would depend on the situation when the time came. The formation that enveloped the entire heavenly Chun continent had to be at least a top saint grade formation. Otherwise, it wouldn't be able to stop the great sage. Next, a top saint grade defensive formation had to be set up in every city and sect. These two sieges were incomparably huge, but it was all worth it. On the same day, Xiaosheng and the others issued orders according to Chunling's suggestion. The ones who completed this important task were naturally the Mulan Sacred Palace, led by Quanlan. The Mulan Sacred Palace was now the gathering place of the Sacred Palace's Talisman Masters and Talisman Array Masters. The matter of engraving talisman arrays was naturally left to the Mulan Sacred Palace. Of course, several Sacred Palace Saint Venerables who also cultivated talisman arrays would also help this time. They didn't understand why the four ancestors had suddenly issued such an order, but the Sacred Palace quickly got to work under the four ancestors' orders. Batch after batch of large amounts of resources were transported to the hands of the Mulan Sacred Palace's Saintess, Quanlan. The construction of the talisman arrays began immediately. The various sects and families of the heavenly Chun continent didn't return to the Sacred Palace's actions. On the contrary, they were very cooperative. This was normal. After all, the Sacred Palace was engraving defensive formations for them. This is a good thing, so only a fool would refuse. The engraving of the formations proceeded in an orderly manner. Half a month later, the Sacred Palace's actions attracted the attention of 9 heavens and the other 4 great sections. At the same time, the 4 great sects sent people to the Sacred Palace one after another. Xiao Sheng and the other 3 received them personally. No one knew what they discussed, but after the 4 great sects left, they began to imitate the Sacred Palace and began to draw defensive formations. Of course, the 4 great sects also gave the Sacred Palace great benefits. It felt like they were using money to buy information. Xiao Chun naturally guessed some of the 4 great sects' actions. It was very likely that Xiao Sheng and the others had told 9 heavens and the other 4 great sects about the central world. However, this information wasn't given for free. To put it bluntly, it was sold. The Sacred Palace sold this information to 9 heavens and the other 4 great sects at a high price. The 5 great sects of a North Star world were currently at the peak of their power and had begun to construct defensive formations on a large scale at the same time. This puzzled everyone in the North Star world, but the 5 great sects didn't say anything about this, nor did any news spread. Xiao Chan didn't care much about the 5 great sects' actions. After all, he didn't know how to construct talisman arrays. It was better to leave this matter to a professional like Quan Lan. After cultivating in seclusion for more than half a month, Xiao Chen finally waited for the day when the Black Demon Mountain would be opened. As one of the 2 secret zones that the Sacred Palace had just obtained, the opening of Black Demon Mountain was naturally a major event for the Sacred Palace. Because of Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, Gu Lingyao, and Fairy of 100 Flowers were also fortunate enough to enter Black Demon Mountain to cultivate. Even Fei Mei, Qin Yao, Qin Luo, and the other girls were qualified to enter the secret cultivation zone. Thinking about it, Qin Yao, Qin Luo, and the other girls were not disciples of the Holy Palace. They were just Xiao Chen's maidservants. But now, they were all qualified to enter the secret cultivation zone to cultivate. Perhaps this was what people often said about following the right person. The sky had only just brightened, but many disciples had already gathered at the entrance of Black Demon Mountain and the 18 ghost zones. However, most of these people were clearly here to watch the show. Only a very small number of people were truly qualified to enter. Of course, in addition to the Sacred Palace disciples, 9 heavens had also sent 5 chosen. Including Tian Yu, there were exactly 6 people, which coincided with the 6 spots that the Sacred Palace had previously promised. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 12:10. The 9 heavens had sent out 6 chosen to enter the 18 ghost regions and Black Demon Mountain to cultivate. At this moment, Xiao Chun, Long Qing, Chun Ling, Tian Yu, Qin Shu, Flower Fairy, Gu Lingyao, and the others were waiting at the entrance of Black Demon Mountain. Actually, the main reason they'd entered Black Demon Mountain this time was for Qin Shu and the others. During this period of time, Xiao Chun, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and the others had entered the secret realm to cultivate. Only Qin Shu and the others hadn't entered the secret realm. So, the gap between their cultivations had been pulled apart because of this. This time, Xiao Chan mainly hoped to improve their cultivations. As for himself, Xiao Chan didn't have any hope. After all, he'd just broken through to the perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, and it was extremely difficult for him to break through again, even with the help of Black Demon Mountain. After all, even though the secret realm was formidable, it wasn't omnipotent. Otherwise, wouldn't any quasi-saint sect be filled with saints? Qin Shu and the others were slightly excited because they were about to enter the secret realm for the first time. Actually, their natural talent wasn't much inferior to the chosen. To put it bluntly, the reason they didn't have the qualifications to enter the secret realm was entirely because of Xiao Chun. The 3 of them didn't want to leave Xiao Chen's side, so they didn't care about the empty title of chosen. Coupled with the fact that when the 9 heavens and the other 3 sects opened the secret realm, they'd clearly stated that only the chosen of the 5 sects could enter. So, the 3 of them had lost the qualifications to enter. The 3 of them had done a lot for Xiao Chun. so Xiao Chun was naturally moved. So this time, Xiao Chun would rather not cultivate himself so that the three of them could obtain the greatest amount of benefits from Black Demon Mountain. They didn't have to wait for long before Xiao Sheng and the other four ancestors appeared in the air. The entrances of Black Demon Mountain and the 18 ghost regions were right next to each other, so all the disciples quickly quieted down when Xiao Sheng and the others appeared. This was the first time the Sacred Palace had opened its heritage secret zone, so it could be considered an exception. Apart from the 6 chosen and saintesses of Ninth Heaven, the 10 chosen and saintesses of the Sacred Palace, as well as all the prospective chosen and saintesses, were qualified to enter Black Demon Mountain and the 18 ghost zones. Sweeping their eyes over the disciples present, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 didn't say anything. Bing Lian and Meng Jie directly opened the entrances to the 2 secret realms. As soon as the entrances opened, the chosen and Meng Jie, the prospective chosen and the prospective chosen of holy regions rushed into the secret realm. The chosen were all chosen and Meng Jie, and the chosen were chosen were extremely excited to enter the secret realm. But, of course, compared to their excitement, the surrounding ordinary disciples were envious. This was because they did not have the qualifications to enter the Heritage Secret Realm. If they wanted to enter the Heritage Secret Realm, they would have to work hard. Like the others, Xiao Chun led Tian Yu, Qin Shu, and the other 2 girls, as well as Chun Ling and Long Qing, into the Black Demon Mountain under the envious gazes of countless people. Everyone had already learned about Black Demon Mountain, so they weren't too surprised when they saw the giant black mountain in front of them after passing through the entrance. The entire Black Demon Mountain world was very simple, other than a huge black mountain peak in the center, which was enough to make one speechless. There was nothing else. This giant black mountain was the only and most precious part of Black Demon Mountain. It was said that this black mountain was the first mountain formed when the North Star Realm was first formed. It was born with the ability to store, gather, and refine the world's spirit energy. Moreover, the world's spirit energy refined by Black Demon Mountain was extremely easy for people to refine. Therefore, cultivating on Black Demon Mountain was much easier than cultivating in the outside world. However, although Black Demon Mountain had such a terrifying ability, it also had some limitations. There was a mysterious pressure on Black Demon Mountain. Moreover, the closer one was to the top, the stronger the pressure. Of course, the closer one was to the top, the better the effect of cultivation. However, the prerequisite was that one had to be able to withstand the terrifying pressure. The top of the mountain was undoubtedly the best place to cultivate. However, the chosen and Meng Jie who entered Black Demon Mountain with Xiao Chun and the others couldn't even reach the top of Black Demon Mountain. Very few people could even reach the middle of the mountain. The chosen and Meng Jie climbed Black Demon Mountain with all their might until they could no longer withstand the pressure of Black Demon Mountain. Only then would they choose to stop. Everyone knew that the closer one was to the top, the better the effect would be. Therefore, many people also wanted to do their best to get closer to the top. Seeing these chosen and Meng Jie climb Black Demon Mountain, Xiao Chun looked at Qin Shu and the other 2 girls and said, "Let's go too." As he spoke, Xiao Sheng, Tian Yu, Chun Ling, and Long Qing acted together to protect Qin Shu and the other 2 girls. They directly flew towards the top of Black Demon Mountain. He didn't let the 3 girls climb like the others. In fact, with their strength, climbing to the middle of the mountain was definitely not a problem. However, it was still a little difficult for them to reach the top. This was also because their cultivation was a little low. They were only at the perfection Tao King realm. Since they were already here, they naturally had to go to the best place to cultivate. So, Xiaoqin couldn't be bothered to waste time and directly led Qin Shu and the other 2 girls to the top of the mountain. Presently, Xiao Chun, Tian Yu, Chun Ling, and Long Qing were all at the perfection Tao King realm. Moreover, every single one of them possessed extraordinary combat strength. So, it wasn't too difficult for them to bring Qin Shu and the other 2 girls to the top of the mountain. As they watched Qin Shiru and the other two girls easily and swiftly walk towards the top of the mountain under the protection of Xiao Qin's group of four, all the Chosen and Meng Jie revealed expressions of envy along the way. It wasn't that Xiao Chun didn't want to help them in the face of their envy. However, he was truly powerless to do so. After all, the pressure on Black Demon Mountain was no joke. Xiao Qin's group of four were already at their limits, protecting Qin Shu and the other two girls. It was impossible for another person to successfully bring them to the top of the mountain. So, Xiao Qin's ability was limited, and he could only apologize. After all, compared to them, Xiao Qun was naturally more important to the people by his side. If he couldn't even help the people by his side and still wanted to help outsiders, then he wasn't being kind but foolish. All along the way, they smoothly arrived at the top of the mountain without any mishaps. At this moment, Xiao Shang's group of four still didn't rest. They took the initiative to resist the pressure on the top of the mountain so that the three girls could cultivate wholeheartedly. This time, Qin Shiru and the other two girls were at the center. Everything that Xiao Qin's group of four did was for the sake of allowing the three girls to obtain the best cultivation environment and maximizing their benefits as much as possible. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 12:11. Xiao Qin's group of four sat around the three women and enveloped them with their auras, helping them resist the terrifying pressure at the peak of Black Demon Mountain. In this way, the three women could wholeheartedly immerse themselves in their cultivation. Just by sitting cross-legged, the three women could sense strands of pure spirit energy ceaselessly entering their bodies from within the mountain. The spirit energy was extremely pure without the slightest impurity. Moreover, they practically didn't need to refine it before it could be converted into their own spirit energy. After sitting cross-legged, Gu Lingyao looked at Xiao Chun, who was similarly sitting cross-legged in front of her, and a wisp of a smile appeared on her face as she said, "Husband, are we cheating by doing this?" The three women naturally noticed Xiao Chen's actions. It could be said that Xiao Chun had arranged everything for the three women during their cultivation on Black Demon Mountain this time. The three women only needed to focus on their cultivation and didn't need to care about anything else. Xiao Chun would deal with it. Such actions were indeed similar to cheating in the eyes of others, but no one would say anything about it. Firstly, Qin Shiru and the other two women were Xiao Chen's women, so Xiao Chen's actions were understandable. Secondly, Xiao Chun was the first chosen of the Sacred Palace, so he didn't need to care about what others thought of him at all. Xiao Chun smiled angrily when he heard Gu Lingyao's words. Make the best use of your time to cultivate and strive to break through to the Tao Emperor realm this time. This time, Xiao Chen's goal for the three women was to break through to the Tao Emperor realm in one go. Breaking through to the Tao Emperor realm was indeed a little too high of a goal. It was clearly impossible to succeed under normal circumstances. However, things were different now that they had Black Demon Mountain. The three women had a very high chance of breaking through to the Tao Emperor realm in one go if they cultivated here. Gu Lingyao stuck out her tongue cutely when she heard Xiao Chen's words, and then she closed her eyes and started cultivating as well. Cultivation on Black Demon Mountain was very peaceful. With the help of Xiao Chen's group of four, the three women's cultivation improved rapidly. Although the three women had missed the opportunity to enter the secret realm some time ago, they didn't slack off in their cultivation at all. They weren't far from the Tao Emperor realm, so with the help of Black Demon Mountain and Xiao Chen's group, their cultivation naturally improved rapidly. Time passed day by day. The two secret realms would be open for a month this time. A month sounded like a long time, but it was only the blink of an eye during cultivation. 20+ days, Xiao Chen's group of four, the three women's auras. When he sensed the appearance of the three women's auras, Xiao Chun, who had his eyes closed, smiled and said, "They're about to break through." During this month, Xiao Chun, Tian Yu, Chun Ling, and Long Qing didn't cultivate. Instead, they used all their energy to resist the pressure of Black Demon Mountain for the three women. The pressure on the mountain peak wasn't weak, so it wasn't easy for Xiao Chen's group of four to resist it. This could be seen from their pale faces. It wasn't hard to imagine that the four of them had consumed a lot of energy during these 20-plus days to help Qin Shiru's group of three resist the pressure of Black Demon Mountain. In order to help Qin Shiru's group of three break through to the Dao Emperor realm as soon as possible, Xiao Qin's group of four could be said to have done their best. Of course, the ones they should thank the most were Chun Ling and Long Qing. After all, the two of them had given up an excellent cultivation opportunity to help Xiao Chun. Chun Ling and Long Qing didn't have the slightest advantage in doing so, but the two of them didn't complain at all. The three of them were siblings, and since Xiao Chun had spoken, they naturally had no reason to refuse. It was finally time to break through. It wasn't just Xiao Chun. A wisp of a smile appeared on the corners of Tian Yu's, Chun Ling's, and Long Qing's mouths. Another day passed. At this moment, the fluctuations of spirit energy on their bodies grew more and more intense. In the end, accompanied by a terrifying storm of spirit energy, their cultivations finally broke through the limits of the Dao Emperor realm and arrived at the Dao Emperor realm. Along with their breakthroughs, the spirit energy in the surroundings madly converged towards them. Black Demon Mountain was a secret realm with extremely dense spirit energy, so there was no need to worry about the spirit energy here being insufficient for their breakthroughs. However, in less than 2 hours of time, their auras had quickly stabilized, and they were fixed at the threshold of the Dao Emperor realm. Their cultivations had successfully broken through, and they opened their eyes with excitement. Especially Gu Lingyao. She couldn't help but look at Xiao Chun with the intention of saying something. However, before she could speak, Xiao Chun had interrupted her. There are still 3 more days. Don't waste it, and try your best to stabilize your cultivations. He didn't give them too much time to be happy because there were still 3 more days before the 1-month deadline. Xiao Chun intended for them to make the best use of these 3 days and utilize the dense spirit energy on Black Demon Mountain to directly stabilize their cultivations. Breaking through to a higher realm was different from breaking through to a higher realm. At the same time, it was obviously much more time consuming to stabilize one's cultivation after breaking through to a higher realm. On the other hand, if they were able to utilize the assistance of Black Demon Mountain and successfully stabilize their cultivations during these 3 days, then it would obviously save a great deal of time. When they heard Xiao Chun, they didn't even have the time to feel happy before they started cultivating once more. On the other hand, Gu Lingyao even puckered her lips with displeasure, but she didn't say anything. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. After a month passed, all the disciples that had entered Black Demon Mountain and the Ghost Territory were forcefully teleported out. After leaving Black Demon Mountain for a month, Qin Shiru and the others' cultivations had already stabilized at the threshold of the Dao Emperor realm. On the other hand, after a month of bitter cultivation, Gu Lingyao was finally able to act coquettishly by Xiao Chen's side without the slightest scruple. After they left Black Demon Mountain, Gu Lingyao hung onto Xiao Chun and spoke incessantly. Husband, Sister Shu, Sister Baiwa, and I have all successfully broken through to the Dao Emperor realm. Are there any rewards? This little girl actually wants a reward after breaking through on her own. When he heard this, Xiao Chun said helplessly, "You broke through on your own, yet you still want others to reward you. I don't care. In any case, I broke through. Are you going to give it to me or not?" Gu Lingyao refused to comply. When he saw this, Xiao Chun smiled and rubbed the little girl's head helplessly. "All right, tell me what reward you want. Even if it's the moon in the sky, I'll pluck it down for you." "I don't want the moon. I want husband to take us out to play. You haven't taken us out to play in a long time. Moreover, there are many places in the North Star boundary that we haven't been to." Gu Lingyao pouted when she heard this. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 12:12. Gu Lingyao held Xiao Chen's hand and acted coquettishly. Previously, due to the tense situation in the North Star realm, everyone's nerves had been tense. Besides fighting, Gu Lingyao and the others had not gone anywhere else to play. At this moment, facing Gu Lingyao's coquettishness, Xiao Chun looked at Tian Yue and Qin Shiru. He also felt that it was a good thing to bring the girls to play in the North Star Realm. According to what Qinling had said, since the 100 Race War was about to break out, there was not much time left for peace. Furthermore, the North Star Realm would no longer exist at that time. As such, they should take advantage of this opportunity to bring everyone to relax. In fact, Xiao Chun still felt a sense of self-blame. This self-blame came from the fact that Xiao Chun felt that he had not spent enough time with his family. Not only Tian Yue and Qin Shu, but even by Ru Yue and Xiao Qing were the same. That's right. If Xiao Chun wanted his family, he had to be powerful enough. In order to be powerful, he had to fight and fight. As such, he naturally did not have much time to spend with his family. However, this could not be considered an excuse. It could only be said that he was helpless. Therefore, as long as Xiao Chun had time, he would accompany his family and try his best to make up for this regret. Therefore, without much hesitation, Xiao Chun quickly agreed. Okay, then let's go to various places in the North Star Realm to play. He could not bear to reject Gu Lingyao's request. Of course, this was also what Qin Shuru and the others were thinking. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Gu Lingyao was naturally so happy that she danced with joy. She jumped directly onto Xiao Chun and refused to get down. After confirming that they were going to the North Star domain, they did not waste any time. The next morning, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, made Tian Yue, Qin Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan, by Ru Yue, Xiao Qing, Long Qing, Chun Ling, and even Qin Yu came. The girls, Chun Ling and Long Qing, had naturally received Xiao Chen's invitation, while Chun Yu and the others had volunteered to come after hearing the news. Xiao Chun naturally welcomed Chun Yu and the others who wanted to tag along. Immediately after, the group boarded a starship and began their journey. It was a rare opportunity for them to relax. According to the plan of Gu Lingyao, Tian Yu, Qin Shu, and 100 Flower Fairy, they planned to tour the entire North Star Realm. Every time they arrived at a continent, they would come down and tour it. With their current status, no one in the North Star Realm dared to provoke them, so they had some leisure time. The only troublesome thing was the appearance of Tian Yue, Qin Shu, and the other 3 ladies. Of course, there was also Qing Yao, Qing Luo, Fei Mei, and Lan. Their beauty was also top-notch. Although they weren't as devastatingly beautiful as Qin Shu and the other 3 ladies, they were definitely enough to mesmerize everyone. The appearance of a group of beauties naturally attracted a lot of attention, especially beauties with such beauty that could cause the downfall of a country. Hence, almost everywhere they went, the girls could be said to be the absolute focus of attention. Regarding this, Xiao Chun was helpless. Chun Yu, on the other hand, was drinking and teasing him heartlessly. Haha, junior brother Xiao. I think that in the North Star Realm, when it comes to women, if you claim to be number 2, no one would dare to claim to be number 1. Qin Yu's words were not false. As Xiao Chen's reputation rose, many people in the North Star Realm knew that not only did Xiao Chun have 4 beautiful wives, but even his 6 maids were top-notch beauties. Who knew how many people of the younger generation envied Xiao Chun? However, Xiao Chun did not care about this at all. At this time, when he heard Qin Yu's words, Xiao Chun said in a displeased tone, "Senior brother Qin Yu, why? Are you envious? Let Tian Yu introduce 2 heavenly clan beauties to you." Haha, no need. No need. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chun Yu, who had just taken a sip of wine, almost choked to death. In the end, he smiled embarrassedly. Everyone traveled around the North Star Realm. In the blink of an eye, 2 years had passed. In these 2 years, everyone's footprints had practically covered every corner of the North Star Realm. These 2 years could be said to be Xiao Chen's happiest 2 years. There were no life and death battles, and he did not need to think too much. He just stayed with his family like this. Everyone traveled the mountains and rivers together and experienced the vastness of the world together. In fact, this kind of happiness had always been what Xiao Chun pursued. However, Xiao Chun understood that now was not the time to relax. For the sake of his family, he had to constantly become stronger. After 2 years of traveling, everyone finally took a big detour and returned to the sacred palace. After 2 years, the sacred palace had not changed much. However, the defensive formations had been completely completed by Quan Lan and the Milan Sacred Hall. Today, the sacred palace could be said to be ready to face the 100 Races war at any time. After returning to the sacred palace, another month of peaceful days passed. It was also 1 month later that the upheaval that Ling had mentioned finally arrived. At midnight, the continents of a North Star realm began to involuntarily gather together, as if they were being forcefully sucked over by some force. Being in the sacred palace, Xiao Chun and the others naturally felt this change. Not long after, Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs gathered the 10 chosen, and saint sovereigns of the sacred palace in the sacred hall. What Ling had said had happened. However, only Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs, as well as Xiao Chun and a few others, knew about it. The others did not know. At this time, Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs had gathered everyone in the sacred hall. It was obvious that they were going to announce this matter. Now that the upheaval had occurred, it proved that Ling's words were not groundless or false. Soon, the sacred hall of the sacred palace, which was already late at night, was brightly lit. One by one, the experts of the sacred palace arrived. Everyone gathered in the hall. Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs sat on the main seats. After everyone had arrived, Randang said in a deep voice, "Did everyone feel the upheaval tonight?" Hearing Randang's words, everyone nodded in confusion. They could feel that the heavenly Chan continent was moving at an extremely fast speed. Furthermore, the heavenly Chen continent had already started to connect with the surrounding continents. The continents that should have been unrelated to each other had now merged into a new continent. This made everyone extremely confused. Seeing everyone nod, Randang continued, "The North Star realm, or rather this world, is about to undergo an upheaval. Today, I called everyone here to discuss this matter. Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 12-13. 2 years had passed since the destruction of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Demonic Sky Palace. In these 2 years, the sacred palace had developed steadily and its strength had improved a lot, especially Xiao Sheng and the other 3 patriarchs. Needless to say, Xiao Sheng had broken through to the initial stage of the quasi-saint realm 2 years ago. In these 2 years, Randang, Bing Lian, and Meng Jie had also broken through to the initial stage of the quasi-saint realm. This was naturally great news for the sacred palace. But now, the 100 Race War had arrived. Soon, the 4 astral realms would merge with the central world, and the peaceful times would no longer exist. Xiao Sheng and the other 3 patriarchs had hidden this matter from everyone for 2 years. Now, they could no longer hide it, so Randang told everyone the truth. This was the first time they had heard about the 100 Race War. As soon as Randang finished speaking, everyone except Xiao Chun Ling, and Long Qing were shocked. Randang and the other 3 patriarchs did not disturb everyone. This matter was indeed too sensational, so they had to give everyone some time to digest it. They did not rush them. After a long while, everyone spoke one after another. The 4 astral realms and the central world. Is the world we live in really so vast? I thought the North Star realm was big enough. Yes, it seems that we have always been frogs at the bottom of a well. The sacred venerables spoke one after another. They were all experts of the older generation, but they were still extremely shocked when faced with this reality. It was indeed difficult to accept. While everyone was talking, Xiao Sheng on the high platform finally spoke. He waved his hand, and everyone quickly quieted down. At the same time, Xiao Sheng said indifferently, "No one can stop the 100 Race War. No one can stop the 100 Race War. This is the will of the heavenly Tao. What we need to prepare now is how to safely integrate into the central world. You already know that the central world is not like the 4 great astral boundaries. There are great sane emperors there. There were many things that couldn't be changed or disobeyed. As such, the only thing the sacred palace could do was to protect itself to the greatest extent possible and allow the entire sacred palace to smoothly integrate into the central world. While the sacred palace was having a tense discussion, the nine heavens, myriad beast valley, supreme deity sect, and Li Wang sect were the same. 2 years ago, the four great sects had paid a hefty price to obtain news of the 100 Race War from the sacred palace. Although they were skeptical at that time, they naturally no longer had any doubts now that the situation had changed. The sudden change happened without any warning, leaving no time for anyone to react. In just one night, the countless scattered continents in the North Star realm had perfectly merged into one gigantic continent. Moreover, as all the continents in the North Star realm merged, the horizon of the North Star realm began to collapse. As the horizon collapsed, the space in the North Star realm began to distort. When ordinary people looked up at the sky, they could clearly see that the sky was like a towel that had been forcefully twisted by someone. The entire sky was distorted, and at the same time, cracks had already covered the entire sky. The sun and moon hung in the sky at the same time, and both were already showing signs of collapse. Even the sun and moon were about to collapse. The North Star realm was like the end of the world. The cultivators were still fine with the scene before them. After all, they were powerful and had a broader vision. However, the ordinary people without cultivation were already completely scared out of their wits. All of them hid in their homes in fear and constantly prayed to the so-called gods, hoping that the heavens would bless them. Unlike the panic and helplessness of ordinary people, the 5 great quasi-saint sects had already begun their most intense preparations. The defensive formations that they had spent 2 years drawing were all activated, and important cities were protected. In particular, the 5 great quasi-saint sects were tightly protected by the defensive formations. Everything was going on in a tight schedule. Xiao Chen had just finished dealing with the matters at hand and was heading to the residence of Bai Riyue and Xiao Qing. The 2 elders were still calm. After all, they had been by Xiao Chen's side all these years. Although they were always protected by Xiao Chen, the 2 elders' vision had indeed improved a lot. Therefore, they were still able to remain calm in the face of such a situation. "Chener," Bai Riyue called out when she saw Xiao Chen walking over. At the same time, Xiao Qing, Tianyu, Qin Shu, Qin Yao, Qin Luo, and the other girls all looked at Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen smiled faintly in the face of everyone's gaze. "Don't worry, it'll be fine." Xiao Chen gestured for everyone not to worry too much. Subsequently, he chatted with everyone for a while before leaving. As the first chosen of the sacred palace, there were many things that Xiao Chen still needed to deal with. He walked all the way to the square outside the sacred hall on the main peak of the sacred palace. Xiao Sheng and the other patriarchs were all present, along with a group of sacred palace experts. Everyone had already done what they needed to do. Next, they could only deal with the situation as they saw fit. The sudden change caused the tens of billions of living beings in the various races of the North Star domain to be extremely alarmed. At the same time, the 5 quasi-saint sects announced the 100 Races War to the public one day later. Of course, they only gave a simple introduction and didn't go into too much detail. The only reason he did this was to allow the living beings in the North Star realm to be prepared. Of course, once this news spread, it naturally caused a huge commotion throughout the North Star realm. However, the 5 great quasi-saint sects no longer had the time to care about the outside world's reaction. Given the current situation, they could only clean up the snow in front of their own doors. After the fusion, the incomparably huge continent of the North Star boundary approached the central world at a terrifying speed. For 3 consecutive days, the vast continent seemed to be experiencing an earthquake as the ground trembled continuously. In the face of such tremors, everyone knew that it was not an earthquake, but because the continent was currently moving at high speed. It was many times faster than the speed of a starship. While the North Star boundary was rapidly approaching the central world, the great sage of the various races in the central world were already prepared. In the main hall of a huge mansion in a vast city, a skinny old man with a yellowish complexion and a face full of wrinkles sat on a high throne. Below him, over a dozen human experts sat respectfully. The old man looked at the crowd and said indifferently, "You're right, you're right, you're right." You can start preparing, seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendations. Chapter 12:14. Hearing the old man's words, the dozen or so human race experts all nodded respectfully. This was absolutely shocking. Not only was the old man a great sage emperor in this small hall, but there were also more than a dozen people below him. The weakest among them was a quasi-sage great venerate, and there were even 4 half-step great sages. This kind of strength was enough to easily sweep across the North Star world. However, this was only one of the human race clans in the Central World. That's right, the old man and everyone present came from a large human race clan in the Central World. For a large clan to possess such strength, it was clear how strong the Central World was as a whole. No one knew what the elder meant by preparing to take action, but soon, all the experts in the hall had disappeared, leaving only the elder in the hall. At this moment, the elder let out a long sigh and said, "Let's go. Let's go. I hope the human race won't suffer too many casualties this time." Chunling had said before that every time the 100 Race War began, the first wave of danger was the most serious when the 4 astral realms and the Central World merged. This was because the major forces of the 4 astral realms had just merged with the Central World. Moreover, the 4 astral realms and the Central World could not be compared at all. Therefore, if they were unlucky at this time, it was very likely that they would be completely wiped out. It was very important to know where the Central World would merge. If they could enter the human race's territory as soon as they arrived, they would be safe. However, if they entered the territory of a foreign race as soon as they arrived, it could only be said that everything pointed to disaster. Time passed slowly. Half a month later, the North Star World and the Central World finally began to merge. The North Star World, which had already merged together, was directly separated and began to merge with the Central World. It was like 2 pieces of cloth being forced together. There was no pattern to this at all. Everything could only rely on luck. In the Sacred Palace, the sacred realm where the Sacred Palace was located was forcefully separated from the small world, forming a small new continent that began to merge with the Central World. The speed of the fusion was very fast. In less than an hour, the ground left, and the land where the Holy Palace was located slowly fell to the Central World. Then, the ground healed again, as if nothing had happened. They had finally arrived at the Central World. They could clearly feel that the rich world energy of the Central World was constantly surging towards them through the defensive array. He had never felt such a dense heaven and earth spirit chi. This was just an ordinary place in the Central World, but the heaven and earth spirit chi was so dense that it was not inferior to an ordinary cultivation secret realm. What a rich spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Many disciples couldn't help but exclaim. However, compared to the shock of the numerous disciples on the main peak of the Sacred Palace, Chunling's expression had become incomparably solemn. He glanced at the surrounding environment. Although Chunling had not returned to the Central World for tens of thousands of years, he was still able to determine which race's territory this place belonged to. The Central World was different from the 4 astral worlds. The continents of the 4 astral worlds were divided and scattered everywhere, but the Central World only had one continent. It was huge, and hundreds of races lived together on it. It was precisely because the situation in the Central World was different from the 4 astral worlds that the 100 races of the Central World placed great importance on territory, and the division of territory was very clear. Moreover, due to the different habits and beliefs of the various races, not only were there differences in the construction of cities, but even the surrounding environment was fundamentally different. Just like now, just by looking at the surrounding environment, Chunling could already tell that this was not the territory of the human race, but the territory of the ghost race. The black deadwood would not appear in the human race's territory, but the surrounding area was densely packed with black deadwood. The black deadwood was a type of tree that was completely black and had a hard texture. However, in the entire Central World, only the ghost race liked the black deadwood, and the other races hated it. The reason was very simple. The black deadwood would release a black mist for a period of time every year. This was why the other races did not like it, and could even be said to hate it. However, it was different for the ghost race. The ghost race was born to live in the darkness, so they naturally had an abnormal love for the Black Deadwood. Chunling's expression turned ugly when he actually landed in the ghost race's territory. At the same time, Xiaochun also noticed the change in Chunling's expression and walked up to him and asked, "What's wrong? Looks like our luck isn't too good. We're very unlucky." Chunling did not hide and sighed. "We're not in the human race's territory?" Hearing this, Xiaochun frowned slightly. Hee, not only that, we just happened to land in the ghost race's territory, and the ghost race has the worst relationship with the human race. Chunling smiled bitterly. If it was any other race, it would be better, but there was no need to doubt the ghost race. As long as they knew that the ghost race's the great sage would definitely come immediately and destroy the sacred palace without the slightest hesitation, because the sacred palace was a faction of the human race. I only hope that the human race's reinforcements can come quickly, or things will be troublesome. Chunling finally said. Soon, everyone knew that they were in the ghost race's territory, and for a time, a tense atmosphere began to rapidly spread among the upper echelons of the sacred palace. Once again gathered in the sacred palace, Xiaosheng looked at the people below and said, "Everyone, now that the situation is clear, how should we deal with it? Ancestor, since we're in the ghost race's territory, can we leave first?" Hearing this, a Saint Venerate asked. But just as he finished speaking, Chunling shook his head and said, "That's impossible. The central world is already vast and boundless, and now that it has merged with the 4 great astral realms, it's even more unimaginable. It's impossible for us to escape from the ghost race's territory. Even if we travel at full speed, with the speed of a saint, it'll take at least half a month to leave the ghost race's territory, let alone the disciples below. The ghost race won't give us so much time." It was impossible to escape while the ghost race was not paying attention. Hearing this, everyone's expression became even more solemn. Seeing this, Chunling did not keep them in suspense and directly said, "There's only one way now, and that is to wait for reinforcements until the human race's great sage arrives. At that time, there will be a possibility of negotiation." Sacred son Chunling, how are you so sure that the human race's great sage will definitely come to rescue us? Hearing this, a Saint Venerate asked. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 12:15. Chunling wanted to defend and wait for reinforcements, which was equivalent to placing all his hopes on the great sage of the human race. But what if the great sage of the human race did not come to his rescue? At that time, the sacred palace would really be finished. In response to this sacred master's question, the rest of the people also nodded slightly, and then looked at Chunling, waiting for his answer. Facing the crowd's gaze, Chunling smiled slightly and said, "The great sage of the human race will definitely come to the rescue when he receives the news. As for the reason, it's very simple, because we are of the same race." Chunling had absolute confidence that as long as the great sage of the human race received the news, he would definitely come, because the sacred palace was a human force, and not an ordinary force, but the only quasi-sage sect in the North Star realm founded by the human race. Such a force could not be ignored by the entire human race, so the great sage of the human race could not sit idly by. Seeing how certain Chunling was, everyone was still a little skeptical. However, Xiaosheng, who was on a high platform, spoke up at this time. Holy Son Chunling's words are reasonable. Now our only choice is to defend and wait for reinforcements. Everyone present had doubts about Chunling's words, but Xiaochun chose to believe Chunling. Since Xiaosheng had spoken, the people present naturally did not dare to say anything more. After deciding to defend and wait for reinforcements, the next step was to prepare for defense. The first was naturally the defensive formation. To fight against the great sage, the formation was the only thing the sacred palace could rely on. Once the formation was broken, the sacred palace would no longer have the power to turn the situation around. After all, No one in the sacred palace could fight against the great sage, not even Xiao Sheng and the other three. All the resources of the sacred palace were allocated to the operation of the formation. At the same time, if the great sage of the ghost race attacked, Xiao Sheng and the other three would have to personally guard the formation. Otherwise, it would be difficult to resist the attack of the great sage of the ghost race. Preparations began densely. According to Chun Ling's estimation, the great sage of the ghost race would definitely arrive within 3 days. While the sacred palace was preparing for the upcoming battle, in a mountain range not far from here, there was a ghost race sect standing proudly. Moreover, this ghost race sect was a supreme saint sect. The great sage was presiding over it. It was the Ghost Emperor sect. At this time, in the main hall of the Ghost Emperor sect, more than 10 half-step great sages and quasi-sages sat respectfully. And Great too, they had basically investigated the situation of the sacred palace. Although it was very superficial, there were no mistakes. It seemed that the Ghost Emperor's intelligence network was not simple. The quasi-sage sect of the human race from the North Star realm was not far from the Ghost Emperor sect. Hearing this, a cold light flashed in Ghost Emperor sect's eyes as he said indifferently, "Very well, since the heavens have given us such a great gift, it would be a shame if we don't accept it." Just as Chun Ling said, the ghost race and the human race were the most disliked. The relationship between the two races had always been very tense. It could be said that they had always been in a hostile position. Now that the Ghost Emperor sect knew about the existence of the sacred palace, there was naturally nothing to say. They had to destroy it as soon as possible. Otherwise, the human race's great sages would definitely come to stop them when they heard the news. At that time, things would become more troublesome. After all, the human race's great sages would not give up on a quasi-sage sect. On that day, the figures of the Ghost Emperor sect flew into the sky and then directly disappeared into the void, heading in the direction of the sacred palace. Because they wanted to destroy the sacred palace before the human race's great sages arrived, the Ghost Emperor sect did not send many people this time, only a few dozen people. However, these people were all experts. Among them, there were 2 half-step great sages, 8 quasi-saint great sages, and all of them were saint realm experts. Of course, in addition to these, there was also the great sage Emperor sect's great sage, Ghost Emperor sect's great sage. The experts traversed the void and quickly rushed to the location of the sacred palace. At night, the sky slowly darkened, and the bright moon climbed into the sky. The night was very beautiful, but at this time, no one in the sacred palace was in the mood to enjoy such a beautiful scenery. Everyone looked nervous, as if waiting for something. Xiao Chun and many other experts of the sacred palace had been sitting in the sacred palace, ready to deal with the arrival of the ghost race experts at any time. The night was very quiet, and as the night deepened, the surroundings became even more silent. It was in this silence that the first terrifying pressure finally descended. Feeling the appearance of this pressure, Xiao Sheng, Xiao Chun, and other experts of the sacred palace, who originally had their eyes closed in the sacred palace, suddenly opened their eyes. At this time, Xiao Sheng shouted coldly, "They're here. Everyone, let's go." They had been waiting for the arrival of the ghost race experts, and now, the time had finally come. As Xiao Sheng's voice fell, the experts of the sacred palace flew out of the sacred palace and came to the main square. Through the array, they looked at the sky above. At this time, spatial cracks appeared in the sky, and one by one, the ghost race experts walked out of the spatial cracks. These ghost race experts seemed to be casually standing in various places in the sky, firmly surrounding the entire sacred palace. At the same time, after these people appeared, 3 even larger spatial cracks appeared. Immediately, The two half-step great saints and sovereign ghost Frost slowly walked out of the three spatial cracks. Two half-step great sages stood respectfully on both sides of sovereign ghost Frost. They were slightly behind to show their respect. Sovereign ghost Frost came to the sky above the holy palace with a calm expression. He looked at the people on the main square and said with a natural expression, "Four quasi-saint great sovereigns. As expected of a quasi-saint sect, you have a protective array. It seems that you have been prepared for this for a long time, but do you think this array alone can save you?" As soon as he spoke, Sovereign Ghost Frost did not say anything like surrendering and sparing their lives, because it was simply impossible. Given the relationship between the ghost race and the human race, it was simply impossible. Therefore, Sovereign Ghost Frost could not be bothered to say any more nonsense. Moreover, in his opinion, although the sacred palace was prepared, this array alone was not enough to stop him. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 12:16. A Great Saint. This was a living great saint. A solemn look flashed across the eyes of the sacred palace experts when they heard Sovereign Ghost Frost's words. This was the first time they had seen the great sage with their own eyes. Although Sovereign Ghost Frost did not release the slightest bit of aura, nor did he exude any so-called pressure, Sovereign Ghost Frost simply stood there and calmly spoke a few words. Everyone present could not help but feel fear. Simply put, Sovereign Ghost Frost's words were like the law. If he said that he wanted the sacred palace to be destroyed, then the sacred palace must be destroyed. It was a simple sentence, but it was like an imperial edict that no one could resist. Even Xiao Sheng and the other three, who were quasi-saints, seemed so insignificant in front of Sovereign Ghost Frost. It was also because there was a layer of array separating them. Otherwise, the ordinary disciples of the sacred palace would have been scared out of their wits by Sovereign Ghost Frost. What a joke! How could these disciples resist Sovereign Ghost Frost pressure? Sovereign Ghost Frost did not wait for the crowd to respond. Perhaps from the beginning, he did not intend to listen to the sacred palace's response. The reason was very simple. Who would listen to a group of people who were about to die? He gently pointed his finger. As Sovereign Ghost Frost continued to descend, a black finger light instantly streaked across the sky. It was silent and did not have any terrifying power. However, wherever the black finger light passed, the space began to collapse inch by inch. Along the way, as the black finger light flew past, a long spatial crack appeared in the air behind it, as if it had been torn apart. With a casual point of his finger, he could easily tear the space apart. Finally, under everyone's gaze, the black finger light bombarded the array. There was still no earth-shattering aftermath. It was a very strange collision, but everyone found that when the black finger light hit the array seemed to have been forcibly dissolved by something in an instant. He broke it with a single blow. Someone from the sacred palace exclaimed in disbelief upon seeing this. It had taken 2 years and countless resources of the sacred palace to build this array, but now it could not even withstand a single blow from Sovereign Ghost Frost. Many sacred palace disciples revealed looks of horror on their faces. Indeed, if it was an ordinary saint-level array, it would definitely not be able to stop a great sage like Emperor Ghost Frost. As Emperor Ghost Frost himself said, it was indeed too whimsical for a saint-level array to stop him. With Sovereign Ghost Frost's eyesight, he could naturally tell the level of the sacred palace's talisman array at a glance. Therefore, from the very beginning, Sovereign Ghost Frost was full of confidence. However, it was a pity that the talisman matrix protecting the Holy Palace was not an ordinary saint-level talisman matrix. It was a talisman matrix from ancient times that Xiao Chun had brought out from the secret realm of the Celestial Expanse sect. Moreover, it was the highest-level defensive talisman matrix. In order to inscribe this talisman array, all the talisman array masters in the sacred palace had given it their all. It wasn't just Quan Lan and her Orchid Sacred Hall. Even some saint sovereigns who cultivated talisman arrays had given it their all. Therefore, The few Saint-level talisman array masters did not show much nervousness or fear when they saw the black finger light cut open the array. Instead, they spoke confidently. If this formation is so easily broken, then wouldn't we have wasted the past 2 years of our lives? Following these people's words, the formation that had been rapidly collapsing suddenly began to recover rapidly. At the same time, the black finger light of Ghost Frost Sovereign was swallowed up in an instant. The talisman array inheritance of the Sky Expanse Sect's secret domain could be said to be far beyond this era. It was a treasure that had been left behind since ancient times. As the highest level defensive symbol array, it was called the Nine Suns Encirclement Array, which was also the array protecting the Sacred Palace at this moment. Unlike ordinary Saint-level defensive symbol arrays, the Nine Suns Encirclement Array not only had terrifying defensive capabilities, but also had the ability to devour and self-heal. To put it simply, when a Nine Suns Encirclement Array was attacked, not only could it rapidly self-heal, but could also devour the opponent's attack to support the operation of the array. With the ability to self-heal and devour, the Nine Suns Encirclement Array was undoubtedly extremely terrifying. It could not be compared to the commonly seen Saint-level defensive symbols. He originally thought that a casual attack would be enough to break the Sacred Palace's defensive symbol array, but he did not expect the Nine Suns Encirclement Array to remain as stable as Mount Tai. In the face of such an outcome, Sovereign Ghost Frost's face turned grave. He stared intently at the Nine Suns Tajura formation. After a long while, a look of understanding flashed across his eyes. He then regained his composure and spoke in an indifferent tone. An ancient symbol array. Not bad indeed. Although this array is very strong, how long can it stop me? Sovereign Ghost Frost could easily break an ordinary defensive symbol array. Although the Nine Suns Encirclement Array was much stronger than an ordinary Saint-level defensive symbol array, it was not unbreakable. The Nine Suns Encirclement Array could still be broken, but it would take some effort. Sovereign Ghost Frost ordered the Ghost Emperor sect experts around him. Attack this array with all your might. Sovereign Ghost Frost was not familiar with symbol arrays and had never studied them. Therefore, he could only break the array with brute force if he wanted to, unless he could find a symbol array master with a high cultivation base to help him. However, Sovereign Ghost Frost did not have such an idea. First of all, there were very few symbol array masters who had the ability to break the Nine Suns Encirclement Array. Even in the Central World, they were rare. It was undoubtedly a waste of time to find a symbol array master who could break the Nine Suns Encirclement Array, so it was better to break it with brute force. Although it would take a lot of time to break it with brute force, it was obviously less than finding a symbol array master. As Sovereign Ghost Frost's voice faded, many experts of the Ghost Emperor sect attacked one after another, including the 2 half-step Great Saints. At this time, they also attacked the array without holding back. At the same time, the Nine Suns Encirclement Array endured the attacks of dozens of half-step Great Saints, Quasi-Saints, and Saints, but it was still as stable as Mount Tai. Everyone's attacks were constantly swallowed by the Nine Suns Encirclement Array. At the same time, the damaged areas were also rapidly healing, showing no signs of collapse. Dozens of Ghost Emperor sect experts attacked with all their strength, but they still could not shake the Nine Suns Encirclement Array in the slightest. Seeing this scene, many disciples of the Sacred Palace slowly breathed a sigh of relief. As long as the array was still there and had not been broken, there was still hope for the Sacred Palace. As long as they could hold on until the great saints of the human race arrived, there would be a turn for the better. Request collection, request monthly votes, request recommendation. Chapter 12:17. The only thing the Sacred Palace wanted to do now was to hold on for a while longer. The longer they held on, the greater their chances of survival. Sovereign Ghost Frost naturally knew what the Sacred Palace was thinking. At this time, he also began to attack. Dozens of Ghost Emperor sect experts attacked together, Not to mention that there was a great saint sovereign. Various terrifying superpowers bombarded the array in the sky. At the same time, waves of powerful auras pressed down on the sacred palace disciples, making it difficult for them to breathe. Under such a violent attack, even the 9 suns encirclement array showed signs of exhaustion. Sensing that the 9 suns encirclement array was about to collapse, several saint sovereigns who were proficient in seal arrays came to Xiao Sheng's group and said anxiously, "Ancestor, we have to act now." In the face of such an attack, Xiao Sheng's group and the saint sovereigns of the sacred palace had to do their best to maintain the 9 suns encirclement array. The array must not be broken. It was the only capital the sacred palace had to contend against the Ghost Emperor's sect. Without the array, the sacred palace would undoubtedly be defeated by the Ghost Emperor's sect. Xiao Sheng's group nodded solemnly without much hesitation. Subsequently, Xiao Sheng's group and the saint sovereigns sat down cross-legged on the square. Soon after, terrifying auras shot out from everyone's bodies and quickly entered the 9 suns Tajura array. The principle behind what Xiao Sheng's group was doing was very simple. It was nothing more than instilling all of their spiritual energy into the 9 suns encirclement array, allowing it to operate at full power. As everyone's spiritual energy poured in, sure enough, the array, which was already in a precarious state, quickly stabilized. With enough spiritual energy, the 9 suns encirclement array could operate at full power. When it operated at full power, the attacks of the Ghost Emperor's sect experts could hardly threaten the 9 suns encirclement array. After all, although the Ghost Emperor's sect's attacks were fierce, they could not destroy the 9 suns encirclement array in one fell swoop. As long as they could not destroy it in one fell swoop, the 9 suns encirclement array could quickly heal itself and ensure that the array would not break. With the addition of Xiao Sheng and the other 3, as well as a group of Sage Realm Holy Venerables, a delicate balance was formed between the 2 sides. The Ghost Emperor sect was unable to break through the formation in one go, and for a time, both sides entered into a deadlock. Seeing that the formation had stabilized again, Sovereign Ghost Frost's face darkened. "You're courting death. This sovereign wants to see how long you can hold on." In terms of strength, the Ghost Emperor sect had an overwhelming advantage. However, because of the formation, the Ghost Emperor sect couldn't do anything to the Saint Palace for a while. If it was just an ordinary Saint-level array, the Sacred Palace would definitely not be able to hold on for too long. Even if Xiao Sheng and the others attacked with the strength of the Ghost Emperor sect, it would be destroyed in an instant. But now, the 9 Suns Tajura formation not only had Xiao Sheng and the others personally guarding it, but also had the ability to self-heal and devour. While devouring a portion of the Ghost Emperor's sect's attacks, it also had the support of the spiritual energy of Xiao Sheng and the others. Therefore, the power of both sides formed a delicate balance. Now, it was a matter of whose spiritual energy was depleted first. Without the slightest intention of stopping, the Ghost Emperor's sect's experts continued to attack the formation. Facing the attacks of the Ghost Emperor's sect's experts, the Sacred Palace's side also struggled to hold on. Time passed by minute, and at this moment, the final outcome depended on when the human race's great sage would arrive. The Ghost Emperor's sect moved out, and the Sacred Palace resisted with all their might. Just as both sides were entangled on a misty, immortal mountain in the human race's territory. At the top of the mountain, surrounded by white clouds, a bamboo house stood tall. Outside the bamboo house, an old man with half-black and half-white hair and a ruddy complexion sat cross-legged. A short table was placed in front of him, and wisps of fragrance slowly rose from the table. The old man's appearance was very strange, especially his half-black and half-white hair. It was very suitable for people to remember him at a glance. The old man's name was Yin Yangzi, and he was one of the human race's 3 great sages. The human race forces in the entire Central World could be generally divided into 3 camps, which were respectively led by the 3 great sage forces. The 3 great sage forces, the Great Sage, These were the so-called three masters of the human race. Enyangzi was one of the three masters of the human race, the ancestor of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. At this moment, a lifeless old man appeared in front of Enyangzi, who had his eyes closed without any warning. It was obvious that he didn't have long to live. The old man looked very old, but those who were familiar with him would know that he was actually younger than Enyangzi. However, he was Enyangzi's servant and had always served Enyangzi when he was young. Now, although the old man was still Enyangzi's old servant, his cultivation had reached the half-step great sage realm. In the entire heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, no one dared to underestimate this old man. Enyangzi slowly opened his eyes when the old man appeared. At the same time, the old man said in a hoarse voice, "There's news that the Ghost Emperor sect has already made their move." "Is there no movement from the Xianyuan clan?" Enyangzi wasn't surprised at all. In such a special time of death, the great sage forces of the various clans had activated their intelligence network to the extreme. They would immediately know of any movement. Therefore, Enyangzi received the news as soon as the sacred palace arrived in the ghost race's territory. However, among the three masters of the human race, the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect was the furthest from the ghost race's territory, and the closest was the Xianyuan clan. Therefore, Enyangzi believed that the Xianyuan clan would go to rescue the sacred palace. The Xianyuan clan was another great sage force of the central world's three masters of the human race. Unlike the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, the Xianyuan clan was a clan, an ancient and powerful clan with an extremely long heritage. Its strength couldn't be underestimated. In response to Enyangzi's question, the old servant shook his head slightly. The Xianyuan clan didn't go to the ghost race's territory. Instead, they went to the god race's territory to rescue another human force. The Xianyuan clan didn't go to the ghost race's territory to rescue the sacred palace, but went to the god race's territory to rescue another human force. Enyangzi smiled faintly. That old bastard Xianyuan still hasn't changed. He always picks the soft persimmons to pinch. Forget it. Let me make the trip. I hope I can make it in time. With that, Enyangzi disappeared from where he stood. At the same time, an ethereal voice rang out from the void. It was an indifferent voice. "I'll go first. Hurry over as soon as possible." The voice clearly came from Enyangzi. In order to arrive as soon as possible, Enyangzi took the lead and had the old servant lead the experts of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to come later. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 12:18. Enyangzi set off for the ghost race's territory. At the same time, less than 100 breaths after Enyangzi's departure, several figures rose into the air from the Taiyang sect of heavenly Yin. The experts of the Taiyang sect of heavenly Yin tore through the void above misty immortal mountain, causing spatial cracks to appear in the sky. Several dozen spatial cracks appeared at the same time, creating an extremely spectacular sight. The disciples of the Taiyang sect of heavenly Yin began to discuss with each other in puzzlement when they saw so many experts of their sect had set off. Just the quasi-saint experts alone numbered close to 20. What's going on? What's happened? Something big must have happened for so many powerful individuals to be mobilized. As the disciples discussed among themselves, someone quickly revealed the truth. You still don't know? I heard that a human quasi-saint sect is trapped in the ghost race's territory. The ancestor sovereign personally led people to rescue them. The experts of the Taiyang sect of heavenly Yin had set off together just to rescue the sacred palace. Some disciples were still puzzled. The ghost race's territory? Isn't that closer to the Xianyuan clan? Why do we have to go rescue them? The human quasi-saint sect that had appeared in the ghost race's territory should have been rescued by the Xianyuan clan. However, the Xianyuan clan hadn't gone to the ghost race's territory. On the contrary, the Xianyuan clan had gone to the god race's territory. Enyangzi and the experts of the Taiyang sect of heavenly Yin knew why the Xianyuan clan hadn't gone to the sacred palace's territory and had instead gone to the god race's territory to rescue a human quasi-saint sect instead. Just as Yin Yangzi had said, the Xianyuan clan was like an old woman picking persimmons, picking the weakest ones to pinch. They were well aware of the relationship between the human race and the ghost race. A great battle was unavoidable if the Xianyuan clan had gone to the ghost race's territory to rescue the sacred palace. However, things would have been much easier if the god race had gone to the god race's territory. After all, the relationship between the god race and the human race wasn't too bad at the moment. The Xianyuan clan didn't want to fight the ghost race to the death right from the start. So he'd directly given up on the sacred palace and turned to rescue a human quasi-saint sect instead. Many human forces in the central world were well aware of the Xianyuan clan's way of doing things. Therefore, they were not too surprised even though they despised it. The heavenly Yin Taiyang sect was already rushing towards the ghost clan's territory. In order to arrive as soon as possible, the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect didn't send many people, only a few dozen. However, these people were the same as the Ghost Emperor sect. The lowest cultivation level was at the Saint realm. He didn't know what was going on in the heavenly Yin and Solar sect. At this moment, the conflict between the Sacred Palace and the Ghost Emperor sect had reached its climax. Several days passed, but the Nine Suns Tajura formation protecting the Sacred Palace remained intact despite the efforts of Xiao Sheng and the others. This was something to be happy about, but there wasn't the slightest trace of joy on the faces of the Sacred Palace disciples. This was because Xiao Sheng and the others had consumed a great deal of their spiritual energy over the past few days. At this moment, Xiao Sheng and the others' faces had all turned a little pale. Xiao Sheng and the other three were fine. After all, the four of them were quasi-sage great venerables. However, the situation of the other saint venerables was not so good. After persisting for several days without rest, the saint venerables' faces were already pale. The saint sovereigns were about to run out of spiritual energy. Sovereign Ghost Frost also noticed this, and a cold smile flashed through his eyes. The sacred palace couldn't hold on for much longer. Several days had passed, but the human great saint still hadn't appeared. Logically speaking, given the distance between the Xianyuan clan and the sacred palace, he should have arrived long ago if he wanted to rescue the sacred palace. However, the fact that the Xianyuan clan's experts still hadn't appeared meant that the Xianyuan clan had clearly given up on the sacred palace. The Xianyuan clan's absence was undoubtedly good news for Sovereign Ghost Frost. This way, the Ghost Emperor sect's experts would have enough time to break the formation. The Xianyuan clan is still the same as before. Ridiculous. Sovereign Ghost Frost couldn't help but feel disdain in his heart. He could guess why the Xianyuan clan had given up on the sacred palace. To put it bluntly, the Xianyuan clan didn't want to stand out and wanted to preserve their strength. They didn't want to fight to the death with the Ghost Emperor sect. It seemed that the Xianyuan clan didn't lose anything by doing this, but in fact, it was extremely stupid. The 100 Race War was about to begin, but the Xianyuan clan was still plotting his own scheme. He only focused on himself and not the entire human race. It was simply extremely narrow-minded. Of course, the Xianyuan clan's narrow-mindedness was a good thing for the ghost race. It was also something that Sovereign Ghost Frost was happy to see. Old bastard Xianyuan, you're already so old, but you're still so stupid. Fine, I have to thank your Xianyuan clan for this. Otherwise, how could I have destroyed a quasi-saint sect of your human race so easily? Laughing coldly in his heart, Sovereign Ghost Frost gave the order to attack again, not giving the sacred palace the slightest chance to breathe. It was obvious that the sacred palace was an arrow at the end of its flight. As time passed, the sacred palace's saint sovereigns found it increasingly difficult to hold on. There were several times when the formation began to show signs of collapse. The situation was getting worse. If this continued, the formation would definitely collapse. Xiao Chun and the other chosen stood on the main square. Seeing the increasingly dangerous situation, a glint of determination flashed across their eyes. Xiao Chun said in a clear voice, "Brothers, life and death is at this moment. As disciples of the sacred palace, we should also contribute our strength. In the current situation, it was obviously difficult to rely on Xiao Sheng's group of 4 and the Saint Sovereigns alone. Therefore, Xiao Chun mobilized all the disciples of the Sacred Palace to work together to ensure the operation of the formation. This was the last resort. Although the strength of the disciples was far inferior to Xiao Sheng's group and could be said to be very weak, there were many of them. If everyone contributed their strength, they could at least hold on a little longer. As Xiao Chen's voice rang out, the many disciples, deacons, and elders who were still in a daze recovered from their shock. A look of determination flashed across their eyes. Immediately, Xiao Chen took the lead and sat down. His spiritual energy soared into the sky and instantly sank into the formation. Following Xiao Chen's action, Long Qing, Chen Yu, Emperor Qing, Bai Yi, and the others did the same. Under the leadership of the chosen and saintesses, the other disciples of the Sacred Palace followed suit. For a time, streams of spiritual energy, thick and thin, entered the formation without exception. With so much spiritual energy once again converging into the formation, the 9 suns encirclement formation, which had been on the verge of collapse, became stable again. However, Sovereign Ghost Frost was completely unconcerned. Trap beasts are putting up a desperate fight. Do you think you can overturn the heavens with the strength of ants? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 12:19. The addition of the Sacred Palace disciples did gradually stabilize the 9 suns encirclement formation, but Sovereign Ghost Frost was not worried at all because all of this was only temporary. In order to stabilize the 9 suns encirclement formation and prevent it from collapsing, there must be a huge amount of spirit qi supporting it at all times. Even the Saint Sovereigns of the Sacred Palace would find it difficult to withstand such spirit qi, let alone these disciples with low cultivation. Although there were many disciples, their cultivation was too low after all. For a short period of time, they could indeed rely on the advantage of numbers to forcibly maintain the 9 suns encirclement formation, but after a long time, it was obvious that some of them would not be able to withstand it. At that time, the 9 suns encirclement formation would undoubtedly collapse. A trace of contempt flashed in their eyes, but the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect still did not stop attacking. At the same time, Chunling did not sit down cross-legged like Xiao Chun and the others, but looked at the sky with a complicated expression. The Xinyuan clan still hasn't changed at all. Chunling naturally knew that among the 3 masters of the human race, the Xinyuan clan was the closest to the ghost race's territory, but until now, the Xinyuan clan had not appeared. The answer was self-evident. Just like many years ago, the Xinyuan clan was only thinking about their own clan and how to protect themselves, so they were unwilling to fight to the death with the Ghost Emperor sect. In Chunling's opinion, the Xinyuan clan's choice was both within the plan and unexpected. After all, so many years had passed, and he thought that the Xinyuan clan would have changed, but who would have thought that it was still the same? It was impossible to rely on the Xinyuan clan, so now they could only pin their hopes on others. The Xinyuan clan was unwilling to rescue the Sacred Palace, but Chunling was still confident that the other 2 of the 3 masters of the human race would take action. After all, the Sacred Palace was the human race's quasi-saint sect, but he did not know if they could make it in time. Judging from the current situation, although Xiao Chun had mobilized everyone in the Holy Palace, they could only hold on for another 2 days at most. By that time, those ordinary disciples with low cultivation would have exhausted their spiritual power. At that time, it would not be so easy to maintain the spirit array to contend with the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect. The situation was becoming more and more dangerous, but it was obviously impossible and unrealistic to rely on the Sacred Palace's own strength to contend against the Ghost Emperor sect. The difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great, and they were not on the same level. Therefore, the Sacred Palace could only place their hopes on the great sage of the human race. They could only hope that the great sage of the human race would arrive as soon as possible. There were no absolutes in this world, not to mention in a chaotic world like the Hundred Race War. Every step was fraught with danger, especially for an external force like the Sacred Palace. It could be said that in almost every Hundred Race War, foreign forces like the Sacred Palace would be directly destroyed by the Supreme Saint sects of the Central World. In addition, the Sacred Palace's luck was really bad this time. They had actually landed in the Ghost Race's territory, which could be said to be the worst possible situation. Fortunately, the Sacred Palace had made preparations in advance and set up the 9 suns in encirclement formation. Otherwise, the Sacred Palace would have been razed to the ground. As he thought to himself, Chunling also sat down. Just like Xiao Chun and the others, he continuously sent his spirit energy into the formation. It would be good if they could hold on a little longer. As for the rest, they could only leave it to the heavens to see if the Sacred Palace was truly fated to perish. The attack did not stop for a moment. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Just as Sovereign Ghost Frost had thought, after 2 days, most of the disciples of the Sacred Palace had begun to show signs of exhaustion. These disciples were all ordinary disciples of the Sacred Palace. Their talent was not too high, and their cultivation was relatively weak. They were only able to hold on for 2 days with the help of elixirs. Now, they had finished eating the elixirs, and the spirit energy in their bodies was almost depleted. The faces of the disciples were pale. Although they still clenched their teeth and persevered, the spirit energy in their bodies that was injected into the formation was becoming less and less. The supply of spirit energy slowly slowed down. As a result, the formation naturally became shaky again. Seeing this scene, Sovereign Ghost Frost sneered. Trapped beasts are fighting. What other tricks do you have now? In order to deal with the Sacred Palace, the Ghost Emperor sect had indeed put in a lot of effort. However, although there were some twists and turns in the process, the result did not change. At least in Sovereign Ghost Frost's opinion. Now that the Sacred Palace's 9 suns encirclement formation was about to reach its limit, as long as the formation was broken, it would be easy to take down the Sacred Palace. In addition, everyone in the Sacred Palace was exhausted and their spirit energy was depleted. As a result, without the protection of the formation, they were no different from lambs waiting to be slaughtered. At the same time, Xiaochen also felt the changes in the formation. At this time, his face was also pale. He slowly opened his eyes and glanced around at the many disciples who had begun to faint. A trace of helplessness flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. To be able to endure for 2 days without sleep and rest was already an extremely difficult task for these ordinary disciples. Still not here, he thought to himself. The Sacred Palace could be said to be a lamp that had run out of oil. However, in the end, they still did not wait for the arrival of the human race's great saint. While thinking to himself, Xiao Chen's gaze also turned to Sovereign Ghost Frost in the sky. Just like at the beginning, Sovereign Ghost Frost still looked indifferent, as if he did not take the Sacred Palace seriously from beginning to end. At most, they could hold on for half a day. After half a day, the formation would be broken. More and more disciples fainted. At this time, even Xiao Sheng and the other 3 could not help but open their eyes. A trace of helplessness and unwillingness flashed in their eyes. They had just arrived in the Central World. Were they going to be destroyed just like that? In the North Star boundary, the Sacred Palace could be said to be the top force, but they had just arrived in the Central World. In front of a Supreme Saint sect, they were so powerless. They did not even have the strength to resist. Looking at the dozens of figures of the Ghost Emperor sect in the sky, there was no way to fight this battle. Not to mention Sovereign Ghost Frost, a Supreme Saint. Even the 2 half-step Great Saints were not people the Sacred Palace could contend with. Not to mention, there were more than a dozen quasi-saint Great Venerables around them. This was the disparity in strength. While Xiao Sheng and the other 3 were silent, cracks appeared in the formation. This was a sign that it was about to collapse. Seeing this scene, the Ghost Emperor sect's experts sneered, while the Sacred Palace's people were silent. They still could not hold on. Perhaps the Sacred Palace could only go this far. But at this moment, just as the Ghost Emperor sect's experts were about to destroy the 9 suns encirclement formation, no one saw that an old man in white linen clothes had appeared in the sky. The old man was very unique, especially his half-black and half-white hair, which was particularly eye-catching. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. If you want to talk about Sword Master of 8 Desolations with more like-minded people, follow excellent literature on WeChat. Talk about life, find confidence. Chapter 1220. His half-black and half-white hair fluttered in the wind. This old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion was none other than Yin Yangzi, one of the 3 great saints of the human race. With the great sage's cultivation base, Yin Yangzi rushed all the way from the Tianyin and Taiyang sects and finally managed to catch up at the last moment. Seeing Yin Yangzi's appearance, the people of the sacred palace naturally did not know his identity. However, Chunling knew that he had seen Yin Yangzi before. At this moment, Chunling's face also showed a smile. Since Yin Yangzi had arrived, it meant that things had taken a turn for the better. At least, the great saints of the human race had not completely abandoned the sacred palace. Countless pairs of eyes stared at Yin Yangzi in the sky. At the same time, Sovereign Ghost Frost also looked at Yin Yangzi and said with an unfriendly expression, "Yin Yangzi, are you here to die?" The ghost race and the human race had never dealt with each other, so when the great saints of the 2 races met, the smell of gunpowder was naturally full of tension. In addition, the 9 suns encirclement formation was about to be broken, but Yin Yangzi's appearance at this time made Sovereign Ghost Frost even more furious. However, in the face of Sovereign Ghost Frost's cold shout, Yin Yangzi completely ignored it. He looked down at the sacred palace, and a smile appeared on Yin Yangzi's face. Ancient talisman formation. Not bad. Without this formation, this old man may not have made it in time. Along the way, Yin Yangzi himself thought that the sacred palace might not be able to hold on. After all, the Tianyin and Taiyang sect were very far from the ghost race's territory. Even if Yin Yangzi rushed at full speed, it would still take several days. Such a long time was enough for the Ghost Emperor sect to slaughter the sacred palace. Without the protection of the formation, the sacred palace would indeed have been destroyed. However, things were different now that they had the formation. The sacred palace had persevered. Although they were in imminent danger, they had managed to hold on until Yin Yangzi arrived. Moreover, the sacred palace had not lost a single soldier, which was the most important thing. It was only in this way that Yin Yangzi's rescue would be meaningful. After all, by the time Yin Yangzi arrived, less than 1/10 of the sacred palace's experts would be left. Even if the sacred palace was saved, it would be meaningless. After all, there weren't many experts left in the sacred palace. But it was different now. The sacred palace didn't lose anything. A well-preserved quasi-sage sect would undoubtedly be of great help to the human race. Yin Yangzi was very satisfied with the sacred palace's performance. He would leave the rest to the heavenly Yin solar sect. Yin Yangzi glanced indifferently at the sacred palace below, and then unhurriedly shifted his gaze to Sovereign Gue Shuang with a smile on his face. "I say, old ghost, be wise and retreat. With this old man here, you can't touch them." Yin Yangzi and Sovereign Gue Shuang were both great saint emperors, so the 2 of them were naturally evenly matched. Therefore, Yin Yangzi directly told Sovereign Gue Shuang to retreat as soon as he spoke. Sovereign Gue Shuang's face darkened when he heard Yin Yangzi's words. "Yin Yangzi, don't be too self-righteous. So what if you're here? This old man will destroy this sect in front of you today. Let's see what you can do." Yin Yangzi had only appeared alone. Sovereign Gue Shuang wasn't stupid. Calculating the distance between the heavenly Yin solar sect and the ghost race's territory, Yin Yangzi should be able to arrive in just a few days. This meant that Yin Yangzi was one step ahead. As for the other experts of the heavenly Yin solar sect, they should still be on their way. Since the other experts of the heavenly Yin solar sect were still on their way, Sovereign Gue Shuang had nothing to fear. Although Yin Yangzi was the great sage, Sovereign Gue Shuang could hold him back. In this way, the other experts of the Ghost Emperor sect would still have a chance to destroy the sacred palace if they continued to attack the array. With a plan in mind, Sovereign Gui Shuang shouted in a deep voice, "Continue attacking." After ordering the other experts of the Ghost Emperor sect to continue attacking the array, Sovereign Gui Shuang directly attacked Yangzi. It wasn't that Sovereign Gui Shuang didn't think of joining forces to kill Yangzi, who had arrived alone. After all, there were dozens of experts of the Ghost Emperor sect present, while Yangzi was alone. However, this thought only flashed through Sovereign Gui Shuang's mind, and he quickly rejected it. This was because it was impossible to rely on the advantage of numbers to kill Yangzi. If he couldn't defeat Yangzi, he could easily retreat. At the Great Sage level, it was almost impossible to rely on the advantage of numbers to surround and kill a Great Sage. Only if there were no less than 50 quasi-sage Great Venerables would there be a slight chance. However, among the many experts of the Ghost Emperor sect present, there were only a dozen quasi-sage Great Venerables. It was obviously impossible to rely on a dozen people to kill Yangzi. Of course, if another Great Sage from the Ghost Clan came, there would be a great chance. It was possible for 2 Great Sages to kill 1 Great Sage under the premise of paying a certain price. After all, the Great Sage couldn't escape even if he wanted to. Unfortunately, Sovereign Gui Shuang was the only Great Sage from the Ghost Clan present, so he consciously gave up the idea of killing Yangzi. As long as he delayed Yangzi and allowed the other experts of the Ghost Emperor sect to continue attacking the array, there was still a chance to destroy the sacred palace in one fell swoop. Following Sovereign Gui Shuang's attack, the battle between the Great Sage immediately broke out in the sky. It was just a casual collision, but the space was completely torn apart. The ground below seemed to have completely changed its appearance, and a deep pit was blasted open in an instant. As the attack landed, the terrifying shock waves from their battle spread out in all directions. However, the shock waves quickly dissipated. At the same time, a layer of invisible restriction erupted around the two of them, as if it had peeled off the entire sky. This was the power of space. The Great Sage had already mastered the power of space. When the battle broke out between them, the power of space would imprison the space. This way, the battle between the Great Sage wouldn't cause too much of an impact to the world. Moreover, after the imprisonment of the power of space, the entire space would become more solid and wouldn't be easily shattered. It was different from the battle between quasi-sages and saints. The battle between the Great Sage would no longer enter the void, because even in the void, it was difficult to withstand the powerful power of the Great Sage. Therefore, directly imprisoning the space was the Great Sage's battle method. Once the space was imprisoned, no one below the Great Sage realm could break it, let alone stop it. 2 incomparably terrifying auras soared into the sky from Yangzi and Sovereign Gui Shuang's bodies. At the same time, Yangzi's eyes turned black and white. Yin-Yang eyes. Good. Today, let this emperor see how capable your Yin-Yang eyes are. Sovereign Gui Shuang laughed heartily as he looked at Yangzi's black and white eyes, begging to be collected, begging to be recommended. Chapter 1221. The Yin-Yang I was a special physique that was said to be able to see through all illusions in the world. In the central world, no one dared to underestimate Yangzi's Yin-Yang eye. Even the Great Sage did not dare to lower his guard in the slightest when facing the Yin-Yang eye. Therefore, even though Sovereign Ghost Frost appeared to be full of fighting spirit, in fact, he was still extremely fearful and did not dare to be careless in the slightest. On the other hand, Yangzi's smile did not diminish when he heard Sovereign Ghost Frost's words. I also want to see if your extreme ghost net has improved. Hearing Yangzi's words, Sovereign Ghost Frost coldly snorted and immediately struck out with his palm. Seeing this, Yangzi unhurriedly pointed his finger at the weakest point of the ghost claw at a tricky angle. This was the terror of the Yin-Yang eye. Whether it was a martial skill or a divine ability, the Yin-Yang I could easily see the weakest point, or rather the flaw. This way, one could neutralize the opponent's attack with the smallest price. As his finger fell, Yangzi said indifferently at the same time, "You all just need to guard the array." Yangzi said these words to the Sacred Palace group. Now that Yangzi was entangled with Sovereign Ghost Frost, he could not free himself to deal with the other experts of the Ghost Emperor's sect. However, without Sovereign Ghost Frost, the pressure on the Sacred Palace was obviously reduced by a lot, and the Nine Suns encirclement formation was much easier to deal with. Therefore, Yangzi asked everyone to guard the array. As long as the array was not broken, there was nothing to worry about when the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect arrived. Hearing Yangzi's words, the Sacred Palace group naturally understood the meaning behind his words. Originally exhausted, they all took their last breaths. Yangzi's arrival gave everyone hope. For a time, the Sacred Palace and the Ghost Emperor sect were in a stalemate. Without Emperor Gui Shuang, the attacks of the Ghost Emperor sect's experts were indeed much weaker. This was indeed good news for the Sacred Palace. The weakening of the attacks meant that the Nine Suns encirclement formation required less spiritual energy. As a result, the pressure on the Sacred Palace experts would naturally be reduced. Sovereign Gui Shuang and Yangzi were engaged in a fierce battle, while the Sacred Palace and the Ghost Emperor sect were in a deadlock. For a time, the battle seemed to have entered a stalemate. However, the Sacred Palace was actually more willing to see such a stalemate, because as long as the stalemate continued, the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Solar sect would arrive. At that time, the situation would gradually shift in the Sacred Palace's favor. The Sacred Palace and Yangzi weren't in a hurry, but the Ghost Monarch sect couldn't. They had to destroy this formation before the people of the Heavenly Yin and Solar sect arrived, and then destroy the Sacred Palace. Otherwise, they wouldn't have a chance. In the face of a mere quasi-sage sect, the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect had persisted for nearly 10 days without being able to take it down. This naturally made the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect depressed. However, there was no other way. This Nine Suns encirclement formation, which was passed down from ancient times, was indeed too difficult to deal with. There was no way to break it. Coupled with the appearance of Yangzi, the Ghost Emperor sect felt even more anxious. Originally, it was a simple matter for a Supreme Sage sect to destroy a quasi-sage sect. But who would have thought that this tiny quasi-sage sect would actually have such a turtle shell? It simply made the Ghost Emperor sect's experts unable to do anything. They didn't know where to start from to get rid of this tortoise shell. Just as the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect were extremely depressed, the Sacred Palace was also under great pressure. Everyone was already like a lamp that had run out of oil. At this time, they still had to grit their teeth and persevere. In fact, the Sacred Palace wasn't feeling good either. The two sides were in a stalemate. The battle between Sovereign Ghost Frost and Yangzi had no intention of determining a victor. Both of them were evenly matched. This was normal. After all, at the level of the Great Sage, who would be weaker than the other? At this level, one was already the strongest in this world. Talent no longer had any meaning among the Great Sage. After all, who could break through the Great Sage's level of talent be weak? Everyone was a genius, a monstrous genius. In this way, there was naturally no difference in talent. It was almost impossible to determine a victor. At least, it was impossible in a short period of time. After fighting for a long time, Sovereign Ghost Frost also became a little anxious. The longer the battle dragged on, the more disadvantageous it would be for the Ghost Emperor sect because the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Solar sect should be arriving soon. As if sensing the change in Sovereign Ghost Frost's form, Yangzi chuckled softly. "What's wrong? Old Ghost, are you panicking?" He naturally knew what Sovereign Ghost Frost was thinking. This was also Yangzi's intention. He would delay Sovereign Ghost Frost, while the Sacred Palace would use the array to block the many experts of the Ghost Emperor sect. As long as this stalemate continued, the situation would be completely different once the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Solar sect arrived. Hearing Yangzi's words, Sovereign Ghost Frost's face turned cold. He didn't answer, but he increased the intensity of his attacks. This was the first time they had witnessed a battle between the great sage with their own eyes. It wasn't an exaggeration to describe it as earth-shattering. Unfortunately, Xiao Chun and the others weren't in the mood to enjoy such an earth-shattering battle. At this moment, everyone in the sacred palace was focused on maintaining the array. Time slowly passed. Half a day later, although the 9 suns encirclement array seemed to be on the verge of collapse, it still didn't collapse. It was like a small boat struggling to move forward in a storm. It seemed to be in danger of being destroyed at any time, but it still persevered. After a long time, there was no way to break the 9 suns encirclement array. At this moment, spatial cracks appeared in the sky. Needless to say, the experts of the heavenly Een and solar sect had arrived. Dozens of spatial cracks slowly tore open in space. At the same time, experts in the heavenly Een and solar sect's robes strode out of the void. There were dozens of people in total, men and women, old and young. However, their strength was the same as the Ghost Emperor sect. The weakest among them was at the Saint stage. Moreover, the heavenly Een and solar sect had one more half-step great sage than the Ghost Emperor sect. In the end, they failed to break the array before the experts of the heavenly Een and solar sect arrived. Now that the experts of the heavenly Een and solar sect had appeared, it was obvious that the Ghost Emperor sect no longer had the chance to attack the sacred palace. With the appearance of the experts of the heavenly Een and solar sect, the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect stopped their attacks and looked at the experts of the heavenly Een and solar sect as if they were facing a great enemy. The experts of the Ghost Emperor sect could ignore and despise the sacred palace. However, the Ghost Emperor sect didn't dare to underestimate the heavenly Een and solar sect because the other party was also a great sage sect. Their strength wasn't inferior to the Ghost Emperor sect. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 12:22. The experts of the 2 great sage sects faced each other. Both sides obviously knew each other. At the very least, they had fought before. Therefore, as soon as they saw each other, the experts of the heavenly Een and Taiyang sects sneered. The difference in strength between the 2 sides wasn't great, but in terms of condition, the heavenly Een and Taiyang sect was clearly in a better state, much better state. After all, the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect had been attacking the array with all their strength for so many days. Although they were much better off than the Sacred Palace, they definitely couldn't be considered in peak condition. Under the premise that everyone had consumed so much energy, if the Ghost Emperor sect were to fight with the Heavenly Een and Taiyang sect at this time, there would only be one result: a crushing defeat. After all, the weakest cultivator present had reached the Saint stage. In this way, unless they fought to the death, it would be very difficult for them to die. Life and death were easy to say, but defeat could be said to be a certainty. In other words, the Ghost Emperor sect had no other way to deal with the Sacred Palace. After besieging for so long, they were going to return empty-handed in the end. They had mobilized so many experts, but now, let alone destroy the Sacred Palace, they couldn't even touch a hair of the Sacred Palace. This was unacceptable to the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect. They were depressed, but there was nothing they could do. At this time, Sovereign Ghost Frost and Enyangzi also stopped fighting and came to the front of their respective sections. Sovereign Ghost Frost glanced at the experts of the Heavenly Een and Taiyang sect and said with a gloomy face, "Enyangzi, do you think this can save your sect?" The angriest person was naturally none other than Heavenly Emperor Ancestor Gue Shuang. Even he had personally taken action, but in the end, he couldn't even touch a hair of Yishiwen. As a great Saint Emperor, how could Gue Shuang accept this? At this point, for Sovereign Ghost Frost, it was no longer important whether he could destroy the Sacred Palace or not. Even so, Sovereign Ghost Frost couldn't let Enyangzi have an easy time. A trace of coldness flashed in his heart. At the same time, Enyangzi also said with a chuckle, "What? Old Ghost, you still want to fight? It's all right, I'll keep you company." Enyangzi was not afraid of Sovereign Gue Shuang and the Ghost Emperor sect. Hearing this, Sovereign Gui Shuang's face became gloomier and murderous intent filled his eyes. At the same time, he gritted his teeth and said, Yangzi, don't be happy too early. As Ghost Frost Sovereign spoke, a monstrous ghost chi soared into the sky from his body. At the same time, as the ghost chi spread, the space began to collapse inch by inch, like the bark of a tree that began to fall off. In an instant, a huge black hole appeared in the sky. At the same time, from the black hole, a terrifying void storm wantonly emerged. Upon sensing the void storm, Yangzi's eyes glinted in surprise. Old fogey, you're crazy. You actually triggered spatial turbulence. It had never occurred to him that Sovereign Ghost Frost would not hesitate to trigger spatial turbulence. This was simply insane. Spatial turbulence was a kind of space-time disorder caused by spatial tremors. Once someone was sucked into it, they would either die in the void or be transported to any place in the world. Unexpectedly, Sovereign Ghost Frost did not hesitate to trigger spatial turbulence. Following Yangzi's shout, Sovereign Ghost Frost sneered. Yangzi, you're delusional if you want to bring them back safely. I'd like to see how many people you can save. Triggering spatial turbulence was definitely something only a madman would do. Once someone triggered spatial turbulence, they would definitely be caught in it. Even a great sage or emperor would be injured if they were in the center of the spatial turbulence. It could be said that this was a move that would harm the enemy by 1,000. Therefore, under normal circumstances, no the great sage would be willing to use this move. However, the hatred in Sovereign Ghost Frost's heart was too strong. Even if he was injured, he would not let Yangzi have an easy time. As soon as his voice fell, Sovereign Ghost Frost pushed his hands forward. Immediately, a wave-like void storm rushed madly towards the sacred palace. The 9 suns in encirclement formation could withstand spiritual power attacks, but it could not withstand the void storm. At the same time, Sovereign Ghost Frost was naturally the first to be swallowed by the void storm. His face instantly turned pale. However, as the great sage, even if he was swallowed by the spatial turbulence, he was still as steady as Mount Tai. There was no sign of him being swept away. Although Sovereign Ghost Frost could resist the spatial turbulence, the many disciples of the sacred palace were in trouble. At this time, the spatial turbulence frantically passed through the 9 suns in encirclement formation and rushed into the sacred palace. Many disciples of the sacred palace were quickly swept away by the spatial turbulence. Seeing this scene, Yangzi did not have time to think. He immediately took action to stabilize the space. However, he was still too slow. After all, the spatial turbulence had already appeared. He could only do his best. The raging spatial turbulence continued to sweep away one sacred palace disciple after another. On the main square, Xiao Chun, Qin Shu, and the other 2 girls stood side by side. Feeling the raging spatial turbulence, Xiao Chen's face turned solemn. He could not help but say to the 4 girls beside him in a low voice, "Be careful." This was the first time Xiao Chun had seen the spatial turbulence. It was very terrifying. There was no way to resist it at all. Just as Xiao Chen's voice fell, a spatial turbulence rushed towards the main square. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 did not hesitate. They immediately took action to protect Xiao, Chun, and the others. In the face of the spatial turbulence, there was basically no resistance under the Saint Realm. Fortunately, with the help of Xiao Sheng and the other 3, Xiao Chun and the others were not in danger. They originally thought that the crisis was over, but no one expected Tian Yu to be swept into the spatial turbulence. As the first holy maiden, Tian Yu's strength was not weaker than Xiao Chen's. However, in the face of the spatial turbulence, she still had no power to resist. Seeing that Tian Yu was about to be swept away by the spatial turbulence, Xiao Chun instinctively reached out and grabbed Tian Yu. But the result was obvious. The 2 were swept away by the spatial turbulence almost instantaneously. By the time everyone regained their senses, Xiao Chun and Tian Yu's figures were nowhere to be seen. Qin Shiru and the other two girls' expressions changed drastically when they saw Xiao Chun and Tian Yu being swept away. However, there was nothing they could do in the face of the spatial turbulence. They watched as another spatial turbulence rushed towards the main square. Fortunately, the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect arrived at this time and protected everyone on the main square. At the same time, the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect all over the Sacred Palace took action to protect batch after batch of Sacred Palace disciples. Moreover, Yin Yangzi also took action and gradually stabilized the rampaging spatial force. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1223. Ghost Frost Sovereign's madness was completely unexpected. Even with Yin Yangzi's intervention and the help of the Taiyang sect's experts, over 10,000 Sacred Palace disciples were still swept into the spatial turbulence. No one knew if they were dead or alive. Most of them were naturally ordinary disciples of the Sacred Palace. They were weak and had no one to protect them. But the most heartbreaking thing was that Xiao Chun and Tian Yu were also swept into the spatial turbulence. After being rescued by the experts of the Taiyang sect, Qin Shiru and the other two immediately wanted to rush into the void to save Xiao Chun, but they were stopped by Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chun Yu, and the others. "Let go of me," Qin Shiru said with a cold face. Flower Fairy and Gu Lingyao were the same. Facing the three women's cold shouts, Chun Yu and the others clearly could not let go. Chun Ling opened his mouth to comfort them. "Calm down. I know you're worried about third brother, but even if you rush into the void now, what can you do? Not only will you not be able to save third brother, but you might even die. What will you do then?" Moreover, third brother was only swept away by the spatial turbulence. He might not necessarily be in danger. Perhaps he was just teleported to another place. If you do this, what will happen to third brother when he returns? After hearing Chun Ling's words, Qin Shu and the other two women still refused to give up. Seeing this, everyone knew that the three women wouldn't listen to anything they said. In the end, Longqing had no choice but to directly knock the three women out. Only then did they calm down. At this moment, the three women were in a fit of anger. It was useless to say anything, so they could only temporarily restrain them. After doing all this, Xiao Sheng and the others came to the experts of the Taiyang sect and cupped their hands in thanks. The spatial turbulence was basically under control. Although there were still some losses, there was nothing they could do about it. After the spatial turbulence was brought under control, Ghost Frost looked at Yin Yangzi and said coldly, "Yin Yangzi, I'll remember what happened today. Let's go." Since the Sacred Palace had already paid the price, Sovereign Ghost Frost didn't continue to pester them. If they fought to the death with the Heavenly Yin Sun sect, the Ghost Emperor sect would be at a disadvantage. Therefore, Sovereign Ghost Frost chose to retreat without hesitation. Under the leadership of Sovereign Gue Shuang, the experts of the Ghost Emperor sect quickly retreated. Yin Yangzi did not pursue them. After all, the Sacred Palace was the most important task this time, and the priority was to take the Sacred Palace away from the Ghost Clan territory. So many people, including Xiao Sheng, naturally knew that he was the great sage. So everyone from the Sacred Palace, including Xiao Sheng. Yin Yangzi didn't care about their greetings and said calmly, "Let's leave this place first." After leaving the ghost race's territory, Xiao Sheng and the others hesitated for a moment. But in the end, they still said, "Senior, one of our chosen has been swept into the spatial turbulence." Xiao Sheng was obviously talking about Xiao Chun. His purpose was to get Yin Yangzi to save him. But Yin Yangzi shook his head slightly. "He's already been swept into the spatial turbulence. I can't do anything about it. It all depends on his own fortune. If he's lucky enough not to be swept into the spatial turbulence, we may have a chance to meet again in the future." Yin Yangzi couldn't do anything about it. Xiao Sheng was unwilling to accept this, but there was nothing he could do. If even Yin Yangzi couldn't do anything about it, then there was no need to mention the others. Xiao Sheng and the others didn't have any more time to think. Moreover, to Yangzi, the so-called chosen of the sacred palace wasn't worth mentioning, since he was unfortunately swept into the spatial turbulence. He could only resign himself to fate. In any case, Yangzi wouldn't make a big fuss over a single person. Afterwards, the entire sacred palace was forcefully lifted with the help of Yangzi and the experts of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. It hovered in the air before quickly flying towards the human domain. The entire Saint Palace had been taken away, including the various cultivation mystic realms and heritage mystic realms of the Saint Palace. Along the way, Yangzi and the Taiyang sect experts protected them, so they were naturally safe. While the Sacred Palace group was forcefully heading towards the human territory, Xiao Chun and Tian were tightly holding each other's hands in the spatial turbulence. Spatial turbulence raged in the spatial turbulence. Such spatial storms were absolutely fatal to cultivators of a lower cultivation level. Even Xiao Chun found it difficult to deal with these spatial storms. Xiao Chen's physical body was strong and his skin was thick, but even so, Xiao Chen's body was still covered in wounds and blood flowed freely. Tian Yu was in the same situation as Xiao Chun. Seeing that Tian Yu's clothes were quickly dyed red with blood, Xiao Chun didn't think too much about it. He pulled Tian Yu into his arms and used his body to protect her. The spatial storms constantly tore at Xiao Chen's body like sharp blades. In response, Tian Yu was already sobbing. "Husband, let go of me. Don't do this." Xiao Chun used his body to protect himself. As a result, the spatial storms that Xiao Chun had to endure were much stronger. Tian Yu said tearfully. Xiao Chun forced a smile when he heard Tian Yu's words. "Don't worry, I'm fine. My skin is thick and my flesh is thick." There was no way to control his body in the spatial turbulence. He could only allow himself to be carried along by the spatial turbulence. His injuries were getting worse and worse. Xiao Chun forced himself not to pass out. He knew very well that if he fell unconscious at this time, it would be really dangerous. As long as he could endure it, there would be a chance of survival. One mustn't fall into a state of unconsciousness in the spatial turbulence. This was common sense. That was why Xiao Chun gritted his teeth. Otherwise, he would pass out. No one knew how long they had been floating in the boundless, dark void. Finally, when Xiao Chen's consciousness began to turn groggy, a spatial crack appeared without any warning. Xiao Chun and Tian Yu were directly blown out of the spatial storm into the spatial turbulence. There was a lake with beautiful scenery. The lake wasn't too big. There were two short mountains on both sides of the lake, and the surroundings were filled with reeds. On this day, a spatial crack suddenly appeared in the sky. Then, a man covered in blood and carrying a young woman in his arms shot out of the spatial crack and crashed to the ground. The two of them were naturally Xiao Chun and Tian Yu. They shot out of the spatial crack and crashed to the ground. At that moment, Xiao Chun couldn't hold on any longer. His vision turned black and he lost consciousness. On the other hand, Tian Yu, who had been protected by Xiao Chun, didn't suffer any serious injuries. Therefore, after the two of them landed, Tian Yu struggled to her feet. Without any hesitation, she took out a sacred healing pill and fed it to Xiao Chun. Please add it to your collection. Please recommend it. Chapter 1224. After feeding Xiao Chun a sacred level healing pill and confirming that Xiao Chen's life was not in danger, Tian Yu breathed a sigh of relief and began to look at the surrounding environment. There was no one around. It seemed that this should be a wilderness. The scenery was pretty good. After confirming that there was no danger around, Tian Yu also sat down on the ground. Although her situation was much better than Xiao Chen's, she was still extremely tired at this time. There should be no danger for the time being. It was good that Xiao Chun had enough time to recover from his injuries. After all, neither of them knew where they were now. It was indeed troublesome to drag a seriously injured body. After resting for more than an hour and recovering some spiritual power, Tian Yu carried Xiao Chun all the way to the dense forest by the lake. She found a towering ancient tree and dug a tree hole. This was the temporary shelter for the two. She then checked Xiao Qin's injuries. They were very serious, but fortunately, Xiao Qin's physical body was strong. Otherwise, such injuries would definitely cripple him even if he did not die. It was also because of the tempered battle body's third heavenly body that had the ability to heal quickly. When they were in the void, Xiao Qian was constantly recovering from his injuries, which was why he was able to survive. However, because he overused the self-healing ability of the heavenly body realm, Xiao Qian could only rely on his physical body to recover slowly. He could no longer use the ability of the tempered battle body. A day passed. At noon the next day, Xiao Qian slowly woke up. Seeing Xiao Qian wake up, Tianyu hurriedly came over and asked Xiao Qian with concern, "Husband, how are you?" "It's just a small injury. I'm fine." Hearing Tianyu's question, Xiao Qian smiled. As long as his life was not in danger, Xiao Qian did not think it was a big problem. This was confidence brought by the tempered battle body. After casually chatting with Tianyue for a while, he also found out about the current situation of the two of them. He did not know where exactly this place was, but for now, the best plan was to recuperate. Only when their injuries were completely healed would they have the ability to deal with various dangers. They didn't intend to leave this place in a hurry. Now, this lake was the most suitable place for Xiao Chun and Yi Shiwen to recuperate. This could be considered their only bit of luck. At least they didn't fall into a wolf's den or a tiger's den. After checking his body, Xiao Qian found that the injuries in his body were not light. It was obviously impossible for him to fully recover in half a month. Xiao Qian felt that half a month was a very long time. However, if other people knew about this, they would probably curse. Xiao Qin's injuries would have been life-threatening even for a semi-sage expert. However, Xiao Qin had recovered in just half a month. This couldn't be said to be abnormal. It was simply heaven-defying. This was the advantage of having a strong physical body. It was like an unkillable cockroach. Xiao Qin and Tianyu spent almost every day recuperating. Tianyu's injuries were much lighter than Xiao Qin's, but what was incredible was that Xiao Qin's injuries healed faster than Tianyu's. It only took 10 days for Xiao Qin's injuries to fully recover. It took 5 days less than expected. The help of the medicinal pills couldn't be ignored. Xiao Qin was the first to recover. Such self-healing speed made Tianyu envious. He had an immortal body. As long as he was hanging on by a breath, he could quickly recover. His physical body was definitely Xiao Qin's strong point. There was no doubt about this. After waiting for another 3 days, Tianyu's injuries were completely healed. Only then did the two of them prepare to leave this place. Although this place was safe, Xiao Qin and Tianyu obviously couldn't stay for long. Due to the spatial turbulence, they had been separated from the Sacred Palace group. Hence, Xiao Qin and Tianyu's current goal was naturally to return to the Sacred Palace as soon as possible. They didn't know where this place was, nor did they have any good ideas. Xiao Qin and Tianyu could only choose a direction and force their way out of this place. It would be best if they could find a city or village. That way they could ask where this place was. At the very least, they could find out which clan's territory this place belonged to. They didn't encounter any danger along the way. 2 days later, Xiao Qin and Tianyu finally arrived outside a small village. From a distance, the village didn't seem very big. It only had a population of 100 or so households. Without much thought, Xiao Qin and Tianyu directly headed towards the village. But before they could get far, an arrow suddenly shot out, heading straight for Xiao Qin and Tianyu. It was a sudden attack, but a mere arrow like this posed no threat to Xiao Qin and Tianyu. They couldn't even be bothered to dodge the arrow. Instead, they used their physical bodies to take the arrow head-on. Even though the arrow struck Xiao Qin's body was as hard as steel. The arrow didn't hurt Xiao Qin in the slightest. How is this possible? As soon as the arrow landed, a cry of surprise sounded from nearby. Xiao Qin looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young demon race youth standing there with a bow in his hand. Demon race? A strange glint flashed in Xiao Qin's eyes when he saw the young demon race youth. Then, Xiao Qin easily sensed that there were dozens of demon race cultivators hiding in the surroundings. Xiao Chun guessed that there were so many demon race cultivators. At the same time, he looked at the young demon race youth and said indifferently, "Where's this place? Human race?" asked Xiao Chun, but the young demon race youth didn't answer. Instead, he snapped out of his daze and shouted coldly. As soon as the young demon race youth finished speaking, the demon race cultivators hiding in the surroundings revealed themselves. The leader was a middle-aged man with a cultivation base of the Tao transformation stage. These demon race cultivators seemed to be full of hostility towards Xiao Chun and Tianyu. As soon as they appeared, the middle-aged man in the lead shouted coldly, "A human and a heavenly race cultivator. Attack and kill them." Without further ado, the middle-aged man ordered Xiao Chun and Tianyu to be killed. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun wasn't surprised. After all, this was a special period of time. When the major races met, there was basically no such thing as peace. Since the dozens of demon race cultivators attacked, Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't sit still and wait for death. These demon race cultivators were like clay chickens and pottery dogs in front of Xiao Chun. Without much effort, Xiao Chun killed all the demon race cultivators, leaving only the middle-aged man alive. Xiao Chun walked up to the middle-aged man and asked in a deep voice, "Where is this place?" Xiao Chun spared the man's life because he wanted to know something from him. After some questioning, Xiao Chun finally learned that this was the territory of the demon race. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1225. This was the territory of the demon race. There was a city in the north called Heavenly Demon City, which could be considered a large city in the demon race's territory. After learning the information he wanted from this middle-aged demon, Xiao Chun did not hesitate to end his life with a palm strike. Xiao Chun was merciless when it came to killing these devils. If you didn't kill him, he would kill you. When the War of the 100 Races was about to break out, there was no need for any reason to kill each other. In the blink of an eye, he killed dozens of demon warriors. Xiao Chun sighed softly and said, "It seems that the demon race's territory is a little troublesome." Although the demon race and the human race were not as hostile as the ghost race and the human race, they were definitely not friendly. Moreover, in this unusual period, Xiao Chun was not confident that he could leave the demon race's territory safely. Here, Xiao Chun did not understand the division of the territories of the various races in the central world at all. He also did not know if the demon race's territory was connected to the human race's territory. If not, it would be really troublesome to return to the human race's territory. Falling into silence, Tianyu did not disturb Xiao Chun when she saw him pondering. After a while, Xiao Chun made a decision. Now, it could be said that he was in complete darkness and did not understand the situation in the central world at all. This was obviously not good. Therefore, Xiao Chun planned to go to Heavenly Demon City first. It would be best if he could get a map in the city and figure out the division of the territories of the various races in the central world. Only then could he formulate the next step of his plan. Entering the Heavenly Demon City was obviously a very dangerous thing to do. One had to know that the Heavenly Demon City was one of the largest cities in the demon race's territory. Naturally, it wasn't something this small demon race tribe could compare to. The strongest person in this demon race tribe was only at the Tao transformation realm. However, Heavenly Demon City was different. There was a quasi-sage, great venerable, overseeing it. The consequences of entering Heavenly Demon City as a human could be imagined. Therefore, if he wanted to enter the Heavenly Demon City, he had to find a way to conceal his identity. Glancing at the corpses of the demons, Xiao Chun secretly exhorted before making a bold decision. Just like the ghost race, the demons like to wear loose black robes and cover their faces. This custom gave Xiao Chun a chance to make his move. "I can only give it a try." With a sigh, Xiao Chun collected 2 black robes of the best quality from the corpses of the demons. He and Tianyu draped the black robes over their bodies and covered their faces. Their faces could no longer be seen. The only thing left was to conceal their auras. concealing their auras was a piece of cake for Xiao Chun and Tianyu. Very quickly, their auras were completely cut off. Even a saint stage expert would not be able to sense them. With the cover of the black robes, it was really difficult to see through the identities of Xiao Chun and his companion. They were no different from ordinary demons, except that they were a little thinner. After all, demons were generally very tall and strong. But it was just a small flaw, so it was not a big deal. After making the necessary preparations, Xiao Chun and Tianyu flew all the way to the north. After flying for about half a day, Xiao Chun and Tianyu finally arrived at the Heavenly Demon City. Looking from afar, the huge Heavenly Demon City looked like a huge beast lying on the ground. The city walls, buildings, and various other buildings were all blood red. At first glance, the entire Heavenly Demon City gave off the feeling of a huge beast with its mouth wide open, ready to devour all living things. The Heavenly Demon City was very big and prosperous. However, it was not considered shocking to Xiao Chun and Tianyu. After all, both of them were the first saints in the North Star territory. Naturally, they had a good eye for things. No matter how prosperous a city was, it was difficult for the two of them to be too shocked. Along the way to the city gate, many of the demons who were rushing into the city were like Xiao Chun and Tianyu. They were all wearing black robes that covered their faces. With so many demons, Xiao Chun and Tianyu did not feel out of place at all. Following the crowd, the two of them successfully entered the city. It was unknown whether the demons were too confident or too lazy. Although the city gate of the Heavenly Demon City was guarded by demon experts, it was almost useless. There was no check at all. Entering the Heavenly Demon City safely, Xiao Chun and Tianyu first found an inn to stay. Then, Xiao Chun bought a map of the Central World. With just a glance, Xiao Chun's heart sank again. The demon territory and the human territory did not border. They were separated by the beast race, ghost race, and barbarian race. In other words, from the demon territory, no matter which direction one took, one had to pass through one of the three races: the beast race, ghost race, and barbarian race. Only then could one reach the human territory. Judging from a location of the Heavenly Demon City, the shortest route from the Heavenly Demon City to the human territory was to pass through the territories of the beast race and ghost race. Passing through the territories of the beast race and ghost race and choosing one of the two was actually not a good choice. Xiao Chun already knew about the relationship between the ghost race and the human race, so Xiao Chun immediately ruled out the idea of passing through the ghost race's territory. In this way, only the beast race was left. Compared to the ghost race, it was obviously safer to go from the beast race's territory to the human race's territory. There were two reasons for this. First, the relationship between the beast race and the human race was not as tense as the relationship between the human race and the ghost race. Second, it was easier for Xiao Chun and Tianyu to hide their identities in the beast race's territory. After all, once the beast race transformed, there was not much difference in their appearance from the human race. Therefore, as long as Xiao Chun and Tianyu hid their aura, there would be no problem. Of course, the premise was that Tianyu could not reveal her identity as a member of the divine race. However, it was also very easy to hide her identity as a member of the divine race. After all, the only difference between the divine race and the human race was the mark on their forehead. As long as Tianyu did not reveal the mark on her forehead, there would be no problem. Xiao Chun already had a general plan. He hurriedly returned to the inn and went to his room. He carefully looked at the map in his hand and constantly perfected the route. They had to pass through the territories of the two races in a row. During this period, it was obviously impossible for everything to go smoothly. So many things had to be prepared in advance. Xiao Chun had already expected that the journey would not be peaceful and there would definitely be danger. However, he did not expect that the danger would come so quickly. Just as Xiao Chun stared at the map and seemed to be deep in thought, the door that was originally tightly shut was suddenly kicked open. Then, a young man in a black robe who reeked of alcohol strode in. Mother of Astor's cur, what kind of lousy inn is this? There isn't even a pretty lady here. I say, the young man cursed as soon as he stepped through the door. But before he could finish his sentence, his voice stopped abruptly. At the same time, he looked at Xiao Chun and Tian Yu in front of him with a horrified expression. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 12:26. The young man stared blankly at Xiao Chun and Tian Yu. The reason for this was that Xiao Chun and Tian Yu were not wearing black robes, so their appearances were not exposed in front of the young man. Human, after a brief moment of shock, the young man quickly regained his senses. The alcohol in his body quickly dissipated, and a trace of coldness emerged in his eyes. He did not expect that someone would suddenly barge in. However, Xiao Chun did not hesitate and immediately attacked. He moved his feet and charged towards the young man from the demon clan. Since he had been discovered, he had no choice but to kill him. The young man from the demon clan shouted coldly when he saw Xiao Chun suddenly attack. "You're courting death." As he spoke, a towering aura erupted from the young man's body. He had reached the perfect Tao King stage. To be able to reach the great perfection Tao King realm at such a young age, such a person's identity should not be simple. It should be known that in the sacred palace, a great perfection Tao King realm cultivation was at least at the level of a core disciple. Things were a little unexpected, but Xiao Chun clearly did not have the time to consider this now. The only thing on Xiao Chun's mind was to kill the young man from the demon clan as soon as possible. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. As Xiao Chun's cultivation improved, the dustless sword was also much stronger than when it was first formed. Xiao Chun slashed out with the sword. At the same time, he said to Tian Yu, "Kill everyone in this inn." Such a battle must have alarmed the others in the inn, and even the guards of the heavenly devil city had been alerted. Therefore, Xiao Chun ordered Tian Yu to kill everyone in the inn to prevent any clues from being left behind. They definitely could not stay in this place, but the most important thing was that Xiao Chun and Tian Yu's identities could not be exposed. As long as their identities were not exposed, things would not be too bad. Upon hearing Xiao Chun's order, Tian Yu immediately rushed out of the room and began to kill everyone in the guest battle without any mercy. Tian Yu made a move, and Xiao Chun's sword also slashed out. There was no time to waste, so Xiao Chun used the Saint Grade Martial Skill 9 Sifting Sword Chi right from the start. Golden Sword Chi flashed past, and at the same time, Great Perfection Sword will gushed out. The young man, who had been brimming with fighting spirit, was just about to say something. "You've got some guts, human. I can't believe you came all the way to Heavenly Devil City, too." He originally wanted to say that he was courting death, but as Xiao Chun slashed out with his sword, the young man's expression changed drastically. The young man was clearly very confident in his own strength. When he looked at Xiao Chun, who was about the same age as him, the young man thought that victory was in his grasp. However, who would have thought that a single sword strike would make the young man's hair stand on end? Strong, very strong. Xiao Chun's sword made the young man feel as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. The young man didn't even have time to react. The tip of the sword slashed across. The young man wanted to dodge, but unfortunately, he didn't succeed in the end. The golden tip of the sword slashed across his neck, and then a head flew into the air. Killing the young man with a single slash wasn't difficult for Xiao Chun. Although the young man's talent might be decent, it was only decent. Compared to a top holy son like Xiao Chun, the young man was still too weak. After killing the young man, Xiao Chun didn't hesitate. He grabbed the black robe beside him and put it on, covering his face once again. Then, he strode out of the room. Xiao Chun's battle was over, and Tian Yu's side had also slaughtered everyone in the inn. The two of them met up, and Xiao Chun said softly, "Let's go." They could already sense more than 10 auras rushing toward them. Apparently, the battle just now had attracted the attention of the Heavenly Devil City's guards. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao Chun slashed down with his sword, and the inn was immediately razed to the ground. Xiao Chun and Tian Yu's figures also disappeared. They blended into the crowd and came to a small alley. At this time, Xiao Chun secretly heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, Tian Yu also asked, "Husband, what should we do now?" "Don't worry. Let's find a chance to get out of the city first," Xiao Chun said. He knew very well that their identities could only be concealed for a while. After all, when they killed the young man just now, their auras had been left behind. As long as someone had a good eye, it wouldn't be difficult to determine their identities as humans from their auras. They had to get out of the city quickly. Otherwise, it would be very troublesome if they were late. At the same time, Xiao Qin secretly prayed that the young man's identity wouldn't be too difficult to deal with. He hoped that the young man was merely an ordinary member of the devil race. In that way, Xiao Chun and the others would have more time. However, if the young man's identity was very great, then it would be a different matter. Xiao Chun and Tian Yu didn't hesitate to directly rush out of the city. Not long after Xiao Chun and Tian Yu left, a few young men and women in similar clothes appeared in the sky outside the ruined inn. Every single one of these young men and women weren't very old, but their cultivations were extremely terrifying. The weakest amongst them was at the Tao King realm, and the person in the lead was even at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm. If Xiaoqin was here, then he would definitely be shocked, because the young man in the lead who was at the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm was none other than Shan Mo from the Northern Star Dimension. Shan Mo was originally a holy son of the Devil Sky Palace. Unfortunately, the Devil Sky Palace had been destroyed in the end, and Shan Mo had come to the Central World with the others. Compared to Xiao Chun, Shan Mo had arrived in the Central World almost 3 years earlier. During these 3 years, Shan Mo had successfully joined the Devil Emperor Palace and become a prospective holy son of the Devil Emperor Palace. The Devil Emperor Palace couldn't be underestimated. It was a great saint sect of the Devil race, and its strength wasn't inferior to the Ghost Emperor sect of the Ghost race or the heavenly Yin and Yang sects of the human race. He didn't know that Shan Mo would appear here, nor did he know that the young man from the Devil race he'd just killed was actually a disciple of the Devil Emperor Palace. Killing a disciple of the Devil Emperor Palace was absolutely no small matter. Even if it was just an ordinary disciple, it was still no small matter. He slowly descended to the ruins, and it didn't take long for 2 disciples of the Devil Emperor Palace to carry out the corpse of the young man from before. Shan Mo's expression was calm as he looked at the young man whose head had been separated from his body. He seemed as if he didn't care at all. However, this calmness quickly changed. For some unknown reason, a wisp of shock suddenly flashed through Shan Mo's eyes, but he quickly concealed it. At the same time, Shan Mo used his own aura to conceal the fierce sword intent that belonged to Xiao Chun to prevent others from noticing it. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 12:27. Shan Mo squatted down and seemed to be seriously sizing up the disciple's corpse. However, no one noticed that Shan Mo had erased Xiao Qin's aura from the corpse. In this way, no one could determine Xiao Qin's identity as a human from a corpse. Shan Mo and Xiao Chun could be considered old rivals. At the same time, they could be said to be old friends. Thus, Shan Mo recognized Xiao Chun from the aura. Shan Mo felt very complicated. He was both excited and agitated. Xiao Chun had actually appeared in Heavenly Demon City. This was something that Shan Mo had not expected. On the surface, he acted as if nothing had happened. Soon, a disciple of the Devil Emperor Palace landed in front of Shan Mo and bowed respectfully. "Senior brother, everyone in the inn has been killed. Yes, keep the corpse well. Also, see if anyone in the surroundings witnessed what happened," Shan Mo said indifferently. Hearing Shan Mo's words, the disciple was about to nod in agreement. However, he was first interrupted by another disciple beside Shan Mo. "Senior brother, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. We should first seal the city gates." This person looked to be about the same age as Shan Mo. He was at the initial Tao Emperor realm and was a core disciple of the Devil Emperor Palace. At this moment, his words were filled with hostility. Obviously, this disciple did not like Shan Mo. Their relationship was not harmonious. This was actually because of jealousy. After all, Sha Mo had only joined the Devil Emperor Palace for a short period of 3 years. However, he was already a prospective holy son. On the other hand, he was still an ordinary disciple. Thus, this young man and Sha Mo had always been on bad terms. Of course, what he said was not wrong. They should indeed seal the city gates at the first possible moment to prevent the murderer from escaping. However, Sha Mo did not care about this at all. Do I need you to teach me how to do things? Don't you know the punishment for offending a superior in the Devil Emperor Palace? Do you believe that no one will say anything if I kill you right now? Towards this disciple, Sha Mohi's attitude was extremely cold. Hearing this, although this disciple was unwilling, he did not dare to go against Sha Mohi. He cupped his hands and bowed. Senior brother, please calm down. It was junior brother who was rude earlier. The Devil Emperor Palace had a strict hierarchy. Contradicting a prospective holy son was indeed a serious crime. Sha Mo ignored this disciple. The reason why he did not immediately seal the city gates was to give Xiao Chen more time so that Xiao Chen could take the opportunity to leave Heavenly Demon City. No one noticed Sha Mohi's abnormality, let alone know what Sha Mohi was thinking. Under the deliberate delay of Sha Mo's actions, the Heavenly Demon City, Sha Mo was a holy son too. 10 to 10 hours had passed, and it was obvious that Xiao Chun and Tian Yu had already left the city. They already had a map of the Central World. Although there would be some differences in the map due to the fusion of the 4 great astral realms in the Central World, the division of the various races' territories would not change. As long as this was ensured, Xiao Chun could use this map to find a route back to the human race's territory. They left Heavenly Demon City early in the morning. At night, Xiao Chun and Tian Yu came to a dense forest not far from Heavenly Demon City to rest. Along the way, they did not discover any pursuers. Xiao Chun and Tian Yu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. While the two of them were resting in Heavenly Demon City, in the City Lord's mansion, Sha Mo's courtyard. At this moment, Sha Mo, who was cultivating with his eyes closed in the room, suddenly opened his eyes. A middle-aged man with Saint Realm cultivation appeared in front of him and bowed respectfully to Sha Mo. Master, we have found them. This middle-aged man was also an expert from the Demon Emperor Palace. However, he did not have a close relationship with the Demon Emperor Palace. He could be considered as Sha Mo's guard, just like Elder Master Bai who followed Xiao Chun. Speaking of Elder Master Bai, it had indeed been a long time since he followed Xiao Chun. Their main task now was to protect Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing. With Xiao Qin's help, the two of them had also broken through to the Saint Realm. Now that they thought about it, it should be better for them to stay by Bai Ruyue and Xiao Qing's side. They were of the same nature as Elder Master Bai. Therefore, this middle-aged man actually only listened to Sha Mo. Therefore, during the day, when Sha Mo deliberately created an opportunity for Xiao Chun, he sent this man to search for Xiao Chen's whereabouts. Now, he had finally found him. Hearing this middle-aged man's words, Sha Mo smiled slightly and said, "Brother Xiao Chun, I wonder what kind of expression you will have when we meet again." With that, Sha Mo quietly left Heavenly Demon City alone. He did not bring anyone else with him, not even the middle-aged man. Following the middle-aged man's instructions, he came to the dense forest alone. At this time, Xiao Chun and Tian Yu were also closing their eyes in the dense forest. Recovering the spiritual energy in his body, Xiao Chun suddenly stood up. With a thought, the dustless sword appeared in his hand. Looking at the pitch-black dense forest in front of him, Xiao Chun coldly shouted, "Who is it? Come out." It was impossible for Xiao Chun to be completely defenseless when he was in the territory of the devil race. As such, Xiao Chen's sharp senses allowed him to sense that someone was approaching him. Although the person was trying his best to hide his aura, Xiao Chun was still able to sense it. Along with Xiao Chen's shout, a demon clad in a black robe and whose face could not be seen walked out slowly from the darkness. Upon seeing this demon, Xiao Chen's eyes glinted with murderous intent. He didn't know why this demon would appear here. But no matter what, Shao Chun had already decided to kill this demon on the spot. With this thought in mind, Shao Chun did not hesitate and was about to slash out with his sword. But at this moment, the demon in the black robe suddenly spoke. "Brother Shao Chun, I didn't expect to see you here." Along with this voice, Shao Chun's hand movement paused slightly. Then, the demon slowly removed the black robe that covered his face. At this moment, Shao Chun finally saw the appearance of this demon. A look of surprise appeared on Shao Chun's face as he called out in a low voice, "Shamohi." The demon was naturally Shamo. I didn't expect to see Shamo here. At the same time, the dustless sword in his hand disappeared. The two of them looked at each other. Since they parted ways in the Sky River mainland, they had not seen each other for dozens of years. It was almost equivalent to an ordinary person's lifetime. However, for Shao Chun and Shamo, it was just like the blink of an eye. Their appearances did not change at all. They were still exactly the same as when they were in the Sky River mainland. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendation. Chapter 1228. It had been a few decades since they parted ways in the Heavenly River continent. Both Shao Chun and Sha Mo felt a little emotional when they met again. After looking at each other for a few moments, Shao Chun broke the silence with a faint smile. "Yeah, I didn't expect to meet you here." Shao Chun turned to Tianyu, who had an unfriendly expression, and said, "It's fine. He's a friend from the past." Tianyu naturally didn't know who Sha Mo was. If Shao Chun didn't mention it, Tianyu would have killed Sha Mo. Even though Sha Mo was the quasi-holy son of the Demon Emperor Palace, in terms of strength, he was still inferior to Tianyu. After all, Tianyu was once the #1 holy lady of the North Star boundary. Sha Mo smiled and nodded at Tianyu. Then, he shifted his gaze to Shao Chun and said with a smile, "Brother Shao, I'm really impressed. You actually managed to get holy daughter Tianyu to..." Before he could finish his sentence, Sha Mo revealed an expression that all men understood. Shao Chun did not dwell on this issue. He made a gesture of invitation, and the two of them sat down under a large tree. Shao Chun then opened his mouth and asked, "How did you find me?" Shao Chun was a bit confused as to why Sha Mo would appear here. Facing Shao Chun's question, Sha Mo did not hide anything and said with a smile, "When I saw the corpse, I knew it was you." Sha Mo found out about Shao Chun through the remnant's sword intent on the corpse. Then, Sha Mo told Shao Chun about his experiences over the years. Shao Chun had heard that Sha Mo had joined the demonic Sky Palace in the North Star Realm, and now he was in the Demon Emperor Palace. He had not expected Sha Mo to have experienced so many things, especially when they had crossed the edge of the horizon. It had been a close shave with death, but Sha Mo was lucky to have made it to the central world alive. Shao Chun asked after hearing Sha Mo's words, "Do you hate me?" About the Demon Emperor Palace. Previously, Shao Chun did not know that Sha Mo was a disciple of the demonic Sky Palace. In fact, this was normal. After all, Sha Mo was not well known. Moreover, Shao Chun did not pay special attention to him. Therefore, it was natural that he did not know. The destruction of the demonic Sky Palace was definitely related to the sacred palace. Since Sha Mo was the holy son of the demonic Sky Palace, Shao Chun naturally had reason to guess that he would resent the sacred palace. However, in the face of Shao Chun's question, Sha Mo merely smiled and shook his head. "What's there to be ruthless about? Survival of the fittest. This is how the world works. Moreover, my feelings for the demonic Sky Palace aren't as deep as you think." Sha Mo did not feel much about the destruction of the demonic Sky Palace. First of all, Sha Mo had not been a disciple of the demonic Sky Palace for a long time. Moreover, from the beginning, Sha Mo had opposed the alliance between the demonic Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion. Unfortunately, no one listened to him. Therefore, in Sha Mo's opinion, the destruction of the demonic Sky Palace was completely self-inflicted. He had no intention of bearing a grudge against the sacred palace because of the destruction of the demonic Sky Palace. Sha Mo was living quite well now. The quasi-holy son of the Supreme Saint sect, the Demon Emperor Palace, was actually not inferior to the holy son of the demonic sky palace. In fact, his status was even higher. After all, the Demon Emperor Palace was a supreme saint sect. After chatting with each other for a while and recounting their experiences over the years, Sha Mo finally got to the main topic. He looked at Xiao Chun with a serious expression and asked, "Brother Xiao, why are you in the heavenly devil city? You must know that it's not a good thing for a human to appear in the demon race's territory at this time." "Sigh, it's a long story," Xiao Chun said softly when he heard this. It was very strange that Xiao Chun would appear in the heavenly devil city. When faced with Sha Mo's question, Xiao Chun quickly gave a simple explanation. Sha Mo sighed softly when he learned the cause and effect of the matter. He didn't expect that the North Star world no longer existed and had completely merged into the Central world. Xiao Chun had appeared here by accident because of the spatial turbulence. If Xiao Chun wanted to return to the human race's territory, he would have to cross the territories of the demon race and the beast race. Such a long journey would be dangerous. Not to mention a Dao Emperor realm cultivator like Xiao Chun. Even a quasi-saint supreme venerate might die. It wasn't a simple journey. It could be said to be filled with danger. After listening to Xiao Chen's explanation, Sha Mo was silent for a long time, and then he took out a black token from his spatial ring and handed it to Xiao Chen. "This is the token of the Demon Emperor Palace. Brother Xiao, it should be much more convenient for you to act in the demon race's territory with this token. Moreover, you can use the teleportation formations in the various cities. It'll be safer this way. However, once you reach the beast race's territory, there's nothing I can do." He had no intention of capturing Xiao Chun and bringing him back to the Demon Emperor Palace. Although capturing Xiao Chun might be a great merit, it was meaningless to Sha Mo. He didn't care about such a small reward. On the contrary, Sha Mo hoped that Xiao Chun could safely return to the human race's territory. It was for no other reason than the fact that they were friends. If the people of the Demon Emperor Palace found out that he had privately given the token of the Demon Emperor Palace, it would absolutely be a serious crime. However, Sha Mo still gave this token to Xiao Chun. Xiao Chun took the black token from Sha Mo's hand. He did not refuse, as this token could indeed help him a lot. Xiao Chun didn't have many words of gratitude for Sha Mo's help. The relationship between the two was a little delicate. Moreover, Xiao Chun wasn't someone who was good at thanking others. After keeping the token, Xiao Chun looked at Sha Mo and said, "Brother Sha, I can't thank you enough. I'll remember today's matter. Do we still need to say these things? All right, this is all I can help you with. Be careful, I'm going back." Hearing this, Sha Mo scolded with a smile. He then stood up and patted the dust off his body. Now that he had seen and done what he could, Sha Mo also planned to leave. Seeing this, Xiao Chun didn't urge him to stay. Now wasn't the time to reminisce. Xiao Chun also stood up. Looking at Sha Mo, who was about to leave, Xiao Chun said emotionally, "The next time we meet may be on the battlefield again. Brother Sha, don't die. If there's a chance in the future, you and I should drink and chat again." Sha Mo was from the Demon Clan and was also the prospective holy son of the Demon Emperor Palace. Xiao Chun was from the Human Clan. The two of them were still in different camps. Moreover, it was now the 100-clan war. When the time came, who could guarantee that the Human Clan and the Demon Clan wouldn't go to war? At that time, it wasn't impossible to meet on the battlefield. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Sha Mo smiled and said, "Don't worry, I won't die so easily. You, on the other hand, should first safely return to the Human Clan's territory before talking about other things." After speaking, without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Sha Mo directly disappeared into the darkness in a flash. After watching Sha Mo leave, Xiao Chen looked at Tian Yu and nodded slightly. Then, the two of them also left under the cover of the night, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1229. After safely retreating from the Heavenly Devil City and obtaining the Demon Emperor Palace token, Xiao Chen also personally experienced the power of the Demon Emperor Palace token during their journey. With the token in hand, no matter which city he went to, there would be no obstructions. When he entered the city, the guards would not even dare to check him. It was just a Shamo, he had said. With this token, it would save him a lot of trouble. The journey was much smoother. Moreover, because of the token, Shao Chun and Sha Mo could also use the teleportation arrays in the various demon ray cities. As a result, their speed was much faster. In a short 10 days, Shao Chun and the others entered the beast race's territory. By now, Shao Chun and Sha Mo had already taken off their black robes. In the beast race's territory, there was no point in wearing black robes anymore. In fact, it was a bad thing. They swaggered along the road and showed their true appearance. After all, there were many demonic beasts in the beast race's territory. As long as they didn't expose their aura, there wouldn't be much of a problem. After successfully leaving the demon race's territory and entering the beast race's territory, Shao Chun and Sha Mo took another step closer to the human race's territory. At this time, the sacred palace people in the human race's territory finally settled down. The place where they settled down was not far from the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. The environment was not bad, and it was much better than the North Star boundary. The entire sacred palace had been moved here together, so there wasn't much to pack. They directly chose the location of a new sect and settled down. The only thing worth mentioning was that the sacred palace had now become a subsidiary sect of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. After all, they were rescued by Yin Yangzi and the experts of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, so it was understandable that they were now a subsidiary sect of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Moreover, although they were a subsidiary sect of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect would not interfere in the sacred palace's affairs, nor did they require the sacred palace to hand over any resources to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. The only requirement was that the sacred palace had to obey the orders of the Sky, Yin, and Taiyang sect when war broke out. No matter who the opponent was, as long as the Sky, Yin, and Taiyang sect said to fight, the sacred palace had to fight, even if the opponent was one of the three masters of the human race. With just this one request, they could receive the protection of the heavenly Yin and solar sect. Therefore, this choice was not difficult. Shao Sheng and the other three agreed without hesitation. After all, this was the Central World. Without the protection of a Supreme Saint sect, it would be difficult to survive. Moreover, the Sacred Palace was a foreign force and not a native force of the Central World. Their roots were shallow, so they needed the protection of the Yin and Yang sects. It had become a subsidiary sect of the heavenly Yin Sun sect. At the same time, the Sacred Palace began to search for Shao Chun and Tianyu with the help of the heavenly Yin Sun sect. Yin Yangzi and the experts of the heavenly Yin Sun sect had no interest in Shao Chun and Tianyu. They were only doing a little to help the Sacred Palace. Compared to Shao Chun, Yin Yangzi was actually more curious about the other chosen and saintesses of the Sacred Palace, especially Long Qing. As the great sage, Yin Yangzi could tell that Long Qing was not a human, but a pure-blooded dragon the moment he saw her. Yin Yangzi did not find it strange that a dragon could become a Sacred Palace saintess, because such things were not unheard of. Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, but she had become a saintess of a human force. Such things were not uncommon in the Central World. People called them traitors. Traitors meant that they had betrayed their original race and joined another race. Therefore, it was normal for Long Qing to appear in the Sacred Palace. What really made Yin Yangzi interested in Long Qing was Long Qing's bloodline. Of course, it was not because of greed. As the great sage, Yin Yangzi was not attracted to a pure-blooded dragon. Although a pure-blooded dragon's body was full of treasures, Yin Yangzi was already standing at the peak of this world. These things were not enough to make him pay too much attention. What really caught Yin Yangzi's attention was the extremely pure power of Long Qing's bloodline. According to Yin Yangzi's guess, Long Qing was a direct descendant even among the pure-blooded dragons. She should be a descendant of the current Dragon Emperor's bloodline. But why would a descendant of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline appear in the Sacred Palace? One had to know that the pure-blooded dragons of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline were all people of high status among the beast races. Yin Yangzi did not hide Long Qing's curiosity. Therefore, after settling down in the sacred palace, Yingyangzi personally met Long Qing in the sacred palace. Of course, Xiao Sheng and the other three ancestors were also present, as well as a group of experts from the Tianyin and Taiyang sects. Long Qing strode into the hall when she received Yingyangzi's summons. Long Qing naturally had her guard up in the face of so many experts, especially Yingyangzi. After all, she did not know if Yingyangzi was interested in her bloodline. In this regard, Yingyangzi clearly saw through Long Qing's thoughts. As soon as he spoke, Yingyangzi chuckled and said, "There's no need be nervous. There's no need be nervous. The pure-blooded dragon race doesn't have much allure to me. After all, our paths are different. At my level, it would be a joke if I wanted to devour some bloodline power to improve. Furthermore, no one here would covet your bloodline power. I called you here today to talk to you about why you're here in the Sacred Palace as a descendant of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline." He bluntly told Long Qing that no one present would covet her bloodline power. Long Qing secretly relaxed when she heard this, but she did not dare to be careless. She told Yingyangzi the truth. After hearing about Long Qing's past, Yingyangzi finally understood why Long Qing had appeared in the Sacred Palace, and a smile appeared on his face. No wonder. As soon as Yingyangzi's voice fell, a half-step great saint from the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin spoke up hesitantly. "Patriarch, I'm wondering if we should." He was hesitant. Seeing this, Yingyangzi said indifferently, "If you have something to say, just say it. What are you hemming and hawing for?" After being scolded by Yingyangzi, the half-step great saint gritted his teeth and said, "Patriarch, I'm wondering if you should speak. Ancestor, I'm thinking that since this little girl is a descendant of the Dragon Emperor's bloodline, can we try to contact the dragon race? If we can join forces with the beast race, it will be easier to deal with the 100-race war." Long Qing's identity made the half-step great saint think of allying with the beast race. Hearing this, everyone present pondered for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "Please collect, vote, recommend." Chapter 1230. Everyone knew that the dragon race valued their bloodline very much, so any pure-blooded dragon race would definitely attract the attention of the dragon race. Hence, when they saw Long Qing, they naturally thought of allying with the beast race. In fact, in the Central World, the human race was not considered powerful. Among the various races, the human race was far from the top, and was at most in the upper middle. If they could form a good relationship with the beast race, or even the dragon race, it would definitely be great news for the human race. After all, there were only 3 the great sage in the entire human race, and there were 2 the great sage in the dragon race alone. It was imaginable how powerful the dragon race was. They were almost on par with the entire human race. Hearing everyone's suggestion, Yingyangzi did not have much of a change in expression. After a while, Yingyangzi waved his hand and said calmly, "There's no need to rush now. It's not too late to talk about it in the future." Everyone's suggestion was to make use of the Long Qing, but it was actually not bad for the Long Qing. However, Yingyangzi did not express his agreement, but of course he did not object either. In Yingyangzi's opinion, the possibility of making use of the Long Qing to form an alliance with the dragon race was not high. That's right, the dragon race did value their bloodline very much, but one should not forget that the dragon race was also extremely arrogant. If they wanted to make use of a Long Qing to form an alliance with the dragon race, it would already be a little threatening and bargaining, and the dragon race happened to be an existence that was not afraid of any threats. Hence, it was not realistic to make use of the Long Qing to form an alliance with the dragon race. In fact, if they were not careful, they might even anger the dragon race, and by then, it would be self-defeating. Hence, Yingyangzi did not immediately make a decision, and decided to suppress this matter for the future. After hearing Yingyangzi's words, everyone did not say anything else. Since Yingyangzi had already made a decision, they could only follow his orders. No longer dwelling on the matter of the dragon race, Yingyangzi looked at Xiao Sheng and the others and smiled. The sacred palace has just arrived in the central world, so let's have a good rest for a few days. However, starting tomorrow, I will arrange for the sacred palace disciples to be tested for talent. At that time, those with excellent talent can all head to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect to cultivate. The sacred palace was now a subsidiary sect of the heavenly Yin Yang sect, so any talented disciple could head to the heavenly Yin Yang sect to cultivate. This was great news for the sacred palace. Don't think that these disciples weren't sacred palace disciples just because they went to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. In fact, they were still sacred palace disciples even if they went to the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Moreover, the conditions in the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect were clearly much better than in the sacred palace. Fully aware of the benefits, Xiao Sheng and the others did not think much of Yin Yangzi's words and happily nodded in agreement. After a simple discussion, the crowd dispersed one after another. Yin Yangzi and the heavenly Yin Yang sect experts did not leave. There was still a talent test tomorrow, and Yin Yangzi and the heavenly Yin Yang sect experts wanted to see how talented the sacred palace disciples were. The talent of a sect's disciples was extremely important. The more geniuses there were, the stronger the sect. This was the most basic principle. Hence, Yin Yangzi and the others wanted to understand the sacred palace's strength, or rather, its potential. The best and simplest way was to understand the sacred palace disciples' talent. Unlike the talent test in the North Star world, the Central world already had an extremely perfect system for talent testing. Moreover, in order to more directly reflect the strength of each person's talent, the weapon refiners of the Central world had also researched and refined a treasure called the talent testing stone. Using the talent testing stone to test one's talent, the talent testing stone would perform differently according to the strength of each person's talent. Spirit chi vortexes of different sizes would condense, and the larger the vortex, the stronger the talent. From the weakest 1-meter spirit chi vortex to the strongest 100-meter spirit chi vortex, it represented the strength of each person's talent. After a silent night, early the next morning, Yin Yangzi, the heavenly Yin Yang sect experts, Xiao Sheng, and the other sacred palace experts gathered on the sacred palace master square. Yin Yangzi sat at the head of the table. At the same time, Chun Ling, Long Qing, Chen Yu, and dozens of sacred palace chosen and prospective chosen were gathered below. The sacred palace chosen and prospective chosen were the first to be tested today. They were the cream of the crop among the many sacred palace disciples. To put it bluntly, the strength of their talent could already represent the strength of the other sacred palace disciples to a certain extent. If even the chosen and prospective chosen did not have any talent, there was no need to talk about the other disciples. Therefore, Yin Yangzi only planned to watch the sacred palace chosen and prospective chosen's talent test. As for the other disciples, Yin Yangzi did not have much interest. He nodded at the old servant standing respectfully beside him. Seeing Yin Yangzi's action, the old man also took a step forward. At the same time, the storage ring in his hand flashed, and a giant stone more than 20 meters tall landed in the center of the square. This was the talent testing stone. It was jade white in color and did not appear to be anything special. Following the appearance of the talent testing stone, Yin Yangzi said indifferently from the head of the table, "This is the talent testing stone, used to test one's talent. The method of using it is very simple. The center of the stone is hollow, and one can enter it. After entering, open your heart, and the talent testing stone will naturally test your talent." As he spoke, everyone saw that there was an entrance on the side of the talent testing stone that led directly to the inside of the stone. It could be said that using the talent testing stone to test one's talent basically did not require one to take the initiative to do anything. One only needed to enter the stone, sit down, and open their heart for the talent testing stone to automatically test the strength of each person's talent. After briefly explaining how to use the talent testing stone, Yin Yangzi nodded slightly at Xiao Sheng. Then, Xiao Sheng opened his mouth and announced the start of the talent testing stone. There were not many people taking the test today, only the sacred palace chosen and prospective chosen. As Xiao Sheng's voice sounded, the prospective chosen were naturally the first to begin. At this moment, a young man strode forward. This person was none other than the prospective chosen of the Wuchen's Sacred Hall, Gudu Wuya. He chose to be the first to take the test. To be honest, Gudu Wuya was very curious about the talent testing stone. After all, there was no talent testing stone in the North Star boundary. He strode toward the talent testing stone. Then, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Gudu Wuya entered the talent testing stone and sat down cross-legged with his eyes closed. At the same time, the talent testing stone began to emit a gentle white light. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1231. As the candidate closest to becoming a chosen, Gudu Wuya was undoubtedly number one among the Sacred Palace candidates. As Gudu Wuya sat down cross-legged, the talent testing stone began to emit a faint white light. As the white light appeared, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth began to gather in the air above the talent testing stone, gradually forming a vortex. The appearance of the spiritual energy vortex was the talent testing stone's most direct reflection of a person's talent. In the beginning, the diameter of the spiritual vortex was only 1 meter. This was the weakest talent. As long as one was a martial artist, they would need to have a spiritual vortex of at least 1 meter. It could be said that this was the threshold of martial arts. If a person did not even have the talent of having a spiritual vortex of 1 meter, then they were destined to have no fate with martial arts in this life. This was the first time they witnessed the Central World's talent testing stone. At this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the spiritual energy vortex, and a hint of curiosity flashed across their eyes. Compared to the Sacred Palace group, Yangzi and the other Taiyang sect experts were much calmer. After all, they had seen this kind of talent testing stone countless times. Moreover, Gudu Wuya's talent could only be considered ordinary. However, no one expected that Yangzi and the others' calmness would soon be shattered. The spiritual energy vortex, which was originally only 1 meter wide, suddenly began to expand. 2 meters, 3 meters, 10 meters, 20 meters. In less than 10 breaths of time, the spiritual energy vortex above Gudu Wuya's head had expanded to a full 88 meters wide. 88 meters. Although this result wasn't too exaggerated, one couldn't forget that Gudu Wuya was only a Sacred Palace candidate. He wasn't even a chosen. The 88-meter-long spirit chi vortex was considered above average even among the prospective saints of the Heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect. This kid is really just a Sacred Palace candidate. A quasi-sage of the Heavenly Yin solar sect looked at Xiao Sheng and the others in disbelief as he looked down at Gudu Wuya. It was hard to believe. If Gudu Wuya was the chosen of the Sacred Palace and had an 88-meter spirit chi vortex, it would be easier to accept. However, the truth was that Gudu Wuya was only a prospective chosen. This was a little exaggerated. Facing the question, Dipankara smiled and nodded. His name is Gudu Wuya. He is indeed the first candidate of our Sacred Palace. There was nothing to hide. While the experts were still in shock, Gudu Wuya's talent test ended. He slowly opened his eyes, walked out of the talent test stone, and bowed to the experts on the high platform. At the same time, the quasi-Saint Supreme Sovereign of the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect also nodded with a smile. This kid is not bad. Although he isn't a chosen, his talent isn't any weaker than a chosen. If he is carefully nurtured, I believe he won't be any weaker than the Sacred Palace chosen. The quasi-Saint Supreme Sovereign clearly thought highly of Gudu Wuya. In his opinion, the reason Gudu Wuya couldn't become a Sacred Palace chosen wasn't because he wasn't talented enough. On the contrary, Gudu Wuya's talent had likely surpassed the Sacred Palace chosen. It was just that he hadn't fully matured yet. At the same time, the quasi-Saint Supreme Sovereign took a deep look at Gudu Wuya, as if he was thinking about something. No one knew what the quasi-Saint Supreme Sovereign was thinking. After Gudu Wuya's good start, the other candidates also began their talent tests one after another. Compared to Gudu Wuya's stunning performance at the beginning, they didn't think there would be anything more eye-catching. But who would have thought that in addition to Gudu Wuya, there would be two more candidates among the sacred palace chosen that surprised the experts of the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect. One was Huangfu Ao, whose spiritual energy vortex had reached 87 meters, which was only 1 meter shorter than Gudu Wuya's. The second was Ouyang Roshue, whose spiritual energy vortex had reached 86 meters. Gudu Wuya, Huangfu Ao, and Ouyang Roshue's spiritual energy vortexes were all shocking. At the same time, the gap between the three wasn't that big. He had never imagined that the sacred palace would be hiding three such talented individuals. Moreover, all three of them were only prospective chosen, and not a single one of them was a chosen. Yin Yangzi was a little stunned by the three's appearance. But compared to Yin Yangzi, the other experts of the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect looked at Xiao Sheng's group of four with suspicion. There were even some who directly said, "Looks like the sacred palace doesn't have good eyesight. It seems that your sacred palace has poor taste. It's a pity that such a bright pearl was not chosen as a chosen." His words were naturally filled with a hint of reproach. In the eyes of the Heavenly Yin Sect's experts, Gudu Wuya's trio's talent was more than enough for them to become holy sons and holy daughters. Yet the sacred palace had refused to let them become holy sons and holy daughters. To put it bluntly, the sacred palace had no foresight. After witnessing Gudu Wuya's group of three's talents, many of the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect experts felt that there must be someone among the 10 chosen who wasn't as talented as them. They felt that the pearls were covered in dust. But Xiaoxing only smiled and said, "Everyone, please be patient. The chosen's and chosen's talents haven't been tested yet. I believe you'll know once you're done." Xiao Chan said this very casually, but everyone was stunned when they heard it. What did he mean? Could it be that the chosen of the sacred palace were all more talented than Gudu Wuya? That was impossible, right? Gudu Wuya's group of three had all reached 85 meters, and the highest among them was Gudu Wuya's, who had reached 88 meters. This was already comparable to the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sects chosen. If the Sacred Palace chosens and Sanuses were all more talented than Gudu Wuya, what would that mean? 89 meters? Or more than 90 meters? More than 90 meters? That was absolutely impossible. If one's talent reached 90 meters, they could become a true chosen in the Central World. It was a little too exaggerated, so the Heavenly Yin and Solar Sect experts believed Xiao Sheng's words. But they couldn't embarrass Xiao Sheng on the spot, so they could only secretly mock him. Compared to the others' doubts, Yin Yangzi's interest was piqued. Xiao Sheng spoke so confidently that it didn't seem like he was exaggerating at all. Therefore, Yin Yangzi was looking forward to the Sacred Palace's Chosen's Talent Test, begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.